When single father Daniel Hayes opened his door that stormy night, he never imagined his ruthless CEO, the woman who'd just destroyed his career hours earlier, would be standing there soaked and desperate with her young son. What happened next would change everything they thought they knew about power, pride, and second chances. Stay with me until the end and comment on your city so I can see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights in the Meridian Industries conference room buzzed like angry wasps casting harsh shadows across Daniel Hayes' face as he stood before the mahogany table that might as well have been a tribunal. 23 pairs of eyes stared at him. Curious, others indifferent, but most already mentally checked out. At the head of the table sat Cassandra Blake, CEO and Ice Queen extraordinaire, her steel gray suit as sharp as the blade she was about to drive through his career. "Mr. Hayes," her voice cut through the air like winter wind, "your proposal is—" She paused, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. "Ambitious." Daniel's hands tightened around his presentation folder. In the corporate world, ambitious was code for completely delusional. He'd spent 3 months on this sustainability initiative, working late into the night, after putting his 8-year-old daughter Emma to sleep, fueled by nothing but coffee, and the desperate hope that this might finally be his breakthrough. "Thank you, Ms. Blake. I believe the environmental benefits combined with the long-term cost savings. Cassandra's perfectly manicured eyebrow arched like a question mark made of disdain. "Mr. Hayes, your projected timeline is 18 months for implementation. Your budget request is—" She flipped through his proposal with theatrical slowness. $2.7 million. For what solar panels and feel-good initiatives that might show returns in 5 years. The room's temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Daniel felt heat creeping up his neck, that familiar burn of embarrassment he remembered from childhood, when the teacher would call on him and he didn't know the answer. But this wasn't childhood. This was his career, his future, his ability to provide for Emma hanging in the balance. "Ms. Blake, if I may clarify—" "You may not." Her voice could have frozen hell. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is exactly the kind of thinking that keeps companies stagnant. Throwing money at problems without concrete immediate returns. Mr. Hayes, your heart may be in the right place, but business isn't about feelings. It's about results." Marcus Chen, the CFO, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Sarah Rodriguez from marketing studied her phone like it contained the secrets of the universe. Tom Wilson from operations looked everywhere except at Daniel. These were people he'd worked alongside for 3 years. People he'd shared coffee with, complained about parking spaces, with celebrated birthdays with. Now they sat silent as his professional execution unfolded. Furthermore, Cassandra continued, her voice gaining momentum like a boulder rolling downhill. "This proposal demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of our market position. We are not a charity, Mr. Hayes. We are not in the business of saving the world. We are in the business of delivering value to our shareholders. Period." Daniel's jaw clenched. "I understand that, Ms. Blake, but surely we can what hemorrhage money on unproven technologies sacrifice profit margins for good intentions?" She closed his proposal with a sharp snap that echoed through the room like a gunshot. "Mr. Hayes, I'm going to be very clear because I believe in honesty even when it's uncomfortable. This proposal shows why some people are meant to follow, not lead." The words hit him like physical blows. The room fell so quiet he could hear the air conditioning cycling the distant hum of traffic outside, the sound of his own heart breaking just a little bit more. "Your technical skills are adequate," she continued, her voice now clinical, detached, like a doctor delivering a terminal diagnosis. Your work ethic is sufficient. But vision, leadership, strategic thinking. These are not areas where you excel. I suggest you focus on what you do well, implementation, following directions, maintaining the status quo. Daniel's vision blurred slightly. 3 months of work, of hope, of staying up until 2 a.m., fine-tuning projections and researching case studies. 3 months of telling Emma, "Daddy's working on something important, sweetheart. Something that might make things better for us." All of it reduced to this moment, this public dismantling of not just his proposal, but his worth as a professional. "Any questions?" Cassandra asked the room, but her eyes never left Daniel's face. She wanted to see the exact moment he broke. He could see it in her expression, that predatory satisfaction of someone who'd drawn blood and wasn't quite finished feeding. Nobody spoke. The silence stretched like taffy until it became unbearable. "Excellent. Meeting adjourned." She gathered her papers with crisp efficiency. "Mr. Hayes, a word." The room emptied like a theater after a particularly depressing play. Colleagues filed past Daniel without meeting his eyes, their footsteps on the polished floor sounding like retreat. When the last person left, Cassandra stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked downtown Austin. The city sprawled below them like a circuit board, all lights and connections and purpose. "Daniel," she said, and her use of his first name somehow made everything worse. "I want you to understand something. That wasn't personal." He almost laughed. Almost. It felt pretty personal. Business rarely feels good, but it's necessary. She turned from the window, and for a split second, Daniel thought he saw something flicker in her eyes. Was it regret, uncertainty? But it vanished so quickly, he might have imagined it. "You're a good man, a dedicated employee, but good men don't always make good leaders. And ice queens do." The words escaped before he could stop them. The moment they left his lips, Daniel knew he'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Cassandra's face went through a series of micro-expressions, surprise, anger, something that might have been hurt, and finally, cold fury. "I see." Her voice could have flash-frozen water. "Well, Mr. Hayes, at least now I know what my employees really think of me." "Ms. Blake, I didn't mean—" "Oh, you meant it. And you know what? You're probably right. But ice queens, as you so eloquently put it, keep companies profitable. Ice queens make hard decisions. Ice queens don't let sentiment cloud judgment." She moved toward the door, then paused. Ice queens also remember conversations like this one. And then she was gone, leaving Daniel alone in the conference room, with the taste of career suicide in his mouth, and the slow, dawning realization that he'd just made an enemy of the most powerful person in the building. The drive home was a blur of traffic lights and self-recrimination. Daniel's ancient Honda Civic coughed and wheezed through Austin's rush-hour traffic like an old man climbing stairs. The radio played something cheerful and mindless, but he couldn't hear it over the replay of the meeting looping endlessly in his head. Every word, every pause, every contemptuous look carved itself deeper into his memory. By the time he pulled into the driveway of his modest 2-bedroom house in East Austin, the sun was setting behind a bank of dark clouds that promised storms. The house, a 1950s bungalow with peeling paint, and a porch that sagged like a tired smile, had never looked smaller. 3 years ago, when Sarah was still alive, it had felt like a castle. Now it felt like what it was, the home of a man whose biggest dreams had just been professionally executed. "Daddy." Emma burst through the front door like a blonde tornado, her backpack trailing behind her, her school uniform rumpled from a day of 8-year-old adventures. "Guess what happened at school today?" Daniel caught her in a hug that was equal parts greeting and desperate need for something pure in his life. She smelled like chalk and playground dirt, and that indefinable scent of childhood that always made his heart ache a little. "What happened, Princess?" He managed to inject enthusiasm into his voice, a skill he'd perfected since Sarah's death. Emma didn't need to carry his burdens. Madison's dad came to talk about being a police officer, and he brought handcuffs and everything. And Mrs. Peterson said maybe next time you could come and talk about what you do. She bounced on her toes with excitement. You could bring your computer and show everyone your presentations. Daniel's stomach clenched. That sounds great, Em. We'll see. What do you mean, we'll see? Don't you want to? Her face fell slightly, and Daniel hated himself for putting that uncertainty there. Of course I do, sweetheart. It's just, work is complicated right now. Is it because Mommy's not here to help anymore? The question hit him like a sucker punch. Emma had this way of cutting straight to the heart of things with the brutal honesty only children possessed. Sarah had been the planner, the organizer, the one who would have already scheduled the school visit and prepared a presentation that would have made every other parent's effort look amateur by comparison. No, baby. Work is complicated because sometimes grown-ups disagree about things. Did you disagree with someone today? Too perceptive. Way too perceptive. Something like that. Emma studied his face with the intensity of a detective examining evidence. At 8, she already had Sarah's ability to read people, to see past the walls adults built around themselves. Are you sad, Daddy? He started to say no to give her the standard adult lie that everything was fine. But those earnest blue eyes, Sarah's eyes, stopped him. Yeah, Princess. I'm a little sad. Want me to make you a sandwich? I know how to do peanut butter and jelly now. Mrs. Peterson taught us about being independent. God, she was trying to take care of him. His 8-year-old daughter was trying to fix his broken day with a sandwich. The thought made his chest tight with a mixture of pride and heartbreak. That sounds perfect. They moved into the kitchen, a cramped space with outdated appliances and countertops that had seen better decades. But it was theirs, and Emma's artwork covered the refrigerator like colorful bandages over the sterile white surface. She climbed onto a chair to reach the bread, her tongue poking out in concentration as she spread peanut butter with surgical precision. Daddy? Yeah. At school, when someone is mean to me, Mrs. Peterson says I should try to understand why they're being mean. Like maybe they're having a bad day, or maybe someone was mean to them first. Daniel paused in the middle of pouring milk. That's very wise, Em. So maybe whoever was mean to you today is just having a bad day too. The innocent wisdom of it nearly broke him. Here he was, 34 years old, wallowing in professional self-pity, and his 8-year-old daughter was offering perspective that most adults never achieved. Maybe, he agreed, accepting the sandwich she held out to him like a peace offering to the universe. They ate together at the small kitchen table, Emma chattering about her day, while Daniel tried to focus on her voice instead of the endless replay of Cassandra Blake's words. Outside, the promised storm was building. Thunder rumbled in the distance like an approaching army, and the wind picked up, rustling the oak tree in their backyard that Sarah had always meant to trim. Storm's coming, Emma observed, pressing her face to the window. Looks like a big one. I like storms. They make everything clean afterward. Another bit of 8-year-old wisdom that cut deeper than she could know. Daniel found himself hoping she was right, that storms could wash away more than just dust and pollen. Maybe they could wash away humiliation and failed dreams and the taste of career suicide. After dinner, they settled into their evening routine homework at the kitchen table, while Daniel paid bills on his laptop bath time with way too many bubbles and then stories in Emma's room. Tonight she chose Where the Wild Things Are, a book that seemed particularly appropriate given the day's events. He was Max sailing away to a place where he could be king of all the wild things, where roaring and gnashing of teeth was not only acceptable but encouraged. "Daddy." Emma's voice was sleepy as he tucked her in. "What is it, princess? Tomorrow will be better." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the absolute certainty that only children possessed. Daniel kissed her forehead, breathing in that sweet scent of shampoo and innocence. "I love you, Em." "Love you too, Daddy. Even when you have bad days." He turned off her light and stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her settle into sleep. In the dim glow of her nightlight, she looked so much like Sarah, it made his chest ache. Same blonde hair, same stubborn chin, same ability to find hope in the darkest moments. Daniel made his way to the living room, a space dominated by a couch that had seen better days and a television that was older than some of his co-workers. The house felt different at night, quieter, filled with the ghost of the life he'd once planned. Sarah's presence was everywhere in the throw pillows. She'd chosen the wedding photos on the mantel, the coffee mug she'd bought him that still sat in the kitchen cabinet, too painful to use but impossible to throw away. He settled onto the couch with a beer and tried to process the day. In the corporate world, what had happened wasn't unusual. Proposals got shot down every day. Dreams died in conference rooms across America every hour. But the personal nature of Cassandra's attack, the way she'd systematically dismantled not just his idea, but his capability, his worth, his future, that felt different, that felt intentional. And then there was his response. Ice Queen. God. What had he been thinking? You didn't call the CEO an Ice Queen and expect to keep your job. Even if everyone else in the building thought the same thing, you didn't say it out loud. You didn't sign your own professional death warrant with 2 words and a moment of wounded pride. Thunder crashed overhead closer now, and the lights flickered. Through the living room window, Daniel could see the storm approaching, like something out of a disaster movie, sheets of rain visible in the distance, lightning illuminating the clouds, from within the kind of weather that made you grateful for solid walls and a roof that mostly didn't leak. His phone buzzed, a text from his sister Jessica in Dallas. "How did the presentation go?" Daniel stared at the screen for a long moment. Jess had been so excited about his proposal, had helped him practice parts of it over video chat, had told him this could be his big break. How did you text back that your big break had turned into a complete breakdown? That you'd not only failed spectacularly, but probably destroyed any chance of future success with the company. "Could have gone better," he typed back. "Talk tomorrow." "Of course, love you, little brother. Whatever happened, it's not the end of the world." If only she knew how close to the end it felt. The storm hit with sudden violence, as Texas storms often did. One moment there was distant thunder and the promise of rain. The next, the world exploded in sound and fury. Rain hammered the roof like bullets, and the wind howled around the corners of the house with an almost human voice. The lights flickered more insistently, and Daniel made a mental note to find the flashlights in case the power went out. He was just settling back into his contemplation of professional ruin when headlights swept across his front window. Strange. The Thompsons next door were out of town, and Mrs. Garcia across the street never drove in weather like this. The lights stopped directly in front of his house, and through the rain-streaked glass he could make out the shape of a car in his driveway. Daniel moved to the window, squinting through the storm. It was a BMW, sleek, expensive, completely out of place in his working-class neighborhood. As he watched, a figure emerged from the driver's side, hunched against the rain. The figure moved around to the passenger side and helped someone else out, someone smaller, a child. Lightning flashed, illuminating the scene for a split second, and Daniel's blood froze. Cassandra Blake was standing in his driveway. The woman who had professionally executed him not 6 hours ago was in his driveway, with what appeared to be a young boy, both of them soaked to the skin, in the middle of the worst storm Austin had seen all year. For a moment, Daniel just stood there, his brain refusing to process what his eyes were telling him. This had to be some kind of stress-induced hallucination. CEOs didn't show up at their employees' houses, especially not employees. They'd just humiliated, especially not in the middle of biblical storms. But then she was walking toward his door, one hand on the boy's back, guiding him through the rain. Her perfect hair was plastered to her head, her expensive suit darkened with water. She looked smaller somehow, vulnerable in a way that seemed impossible for someone who wielded power like a scalpel. The knock came tentative, almost apologetic. Daniel's hand hovered over the doorknob. Every rational part of his brain screamed warnings. This was his boss, the woman who had just destroyed his career, the Ice Queen who had made it clear that he was inadequate in every way that mattered. Opening this door could only lead to more humiliation, more professional destruction. But then he thought of Emma's words. Maybe whoever was mean to you today is just having a bad day too. And there was a child with her, a boy who couldn't be more than 10 standing in the storm. Daniel opened the door. Cassandra Blake stood on his doorstep like a drowned executive, her usually perfect appearance destroyed by the rain. Water dripped from her hair. Her suit clung to her frame, and her makeup, what was left of it, was smeared around her eyes. Beside her, a boy with dark hair and serious eyes hugged himself against the cold, shivering in clothes that were as soaked as his mother's. Cassandra started, then stopped. For the first time since Daniel had known her, she seemed at a loss for words. I know this is... My car broke down, and my phone is dead. And... She gestured helplessly at the storm. I saw your lights. Daniel stood there for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only seconds processing the surreal scene. Cassandra Blake. The woman who had called him inadequate, who had suggested he lacked vision and leadership, who had made it clear that good men didn't make good leaders, was asking for his help. The irony was so thick he could taste it. Please, she said, and the word seemed to cost her something significant. Just until the storm passes. I can call a tow truck or an Uber or... Her voice trailed off as another crack of thunder shook the house. No Uber was driving in this weather. No tow truck would come out until the storm passed. Daniel looked at the boy who was trying very hard not to cry, his small body shaking with cold and fear. Whatever his feelings about Cassandra Blake, this child hadn't done anything wrong. This child was scared and wet and cold, and Daniel had a warm house and dry clothes and hot cocoa. Come in, he said, stepping aside. Before you both catch pneumonia. Cassandra's relief was visible, though she tried to hide it behind her usual mask of control. Thank you. I know this is awkward given our earlier conversation. Awkward was one word for it. Completely insane might be more accurate. But Emma was right. Storms made everything clean afterward. Maybe this was the universe's way of washing the slate. They stepped into his living room, immediately creating puddles on the hardwood floor that Sarah had insisted on refinishing their first year in the house. Cassandra looked around with the careful attention of someone assessing unfamiliar territory, taking in the worn furniture, the family photos, the toys Emma had left scattered around, despite his constant reminders to clean up. This is my son, Alex. She set her hand on the boy's shoulder. Alex, this is Mr. Hayes. He works for Mommy's company. Alex looked up at Daniel with eyes that were the same steel gray as his mother's, but softer, somehow less guarded. Hi, he said quietly. Hey there, Alex. I'm Daniel. He crouched down to the boy's level, remembering how much Emma hated when adults towered over her. You're pretty brave coming out in a storm like this. I wasn't brave, Alex said with brutal honesty. I was scared. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do what you have to do even when you are scared. Alex considered this with the seriousness of a philosopher. Then I guess I was brave. I guess you were. Daniel straightened to find Cassandra watching the interaction, with an expression he couldn't quite read. Surprise maybe, or something more complex, layered with emotions he didn't expect to see from the Ice Queen. Let me get you both some towels, he said. And maybe some dry clothes. He disappeared down the hallway, his mind reeling. This couldn't be happening. Cassandra Blake, CEO, Ice Queen, Destroyer of Dreams, was in his living room with her son, both of them looking like refugees from the storm. The same woman who had systematically dismantled his professional worth was now accepting his hospitality. The universe, Daniel reflected as he pulled towels from the linen closet, had a seriously twisted sense of humor. When he returned to the living room, Cassandra was standing exactly where he'd left her, as if moving without permission might violate some unspoken protocol. Alex, however, had wandered over to Emma's toy corner and was examining a Lego spaceship with the careful attention of an engineer. Here, Daniel said, handing them each a towel. And I think I have some clothes that might fit. My late wife's things are... He paused, surprised by how easily the words came. Usually talking about Sarah required more effort. They might be close to your size. Something flickered across Cassandra's face. Was it sympathy? I couldn't impose. You're not imposing. You're cold and wet, and I have warm, dry clothes. It's basic human decency. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with the memory of their earlier confrontation. This was basic human decency, something that had been notably absent from their conference room encounter. Thank you, she said quietly. Daniel led them down the hallway past Emma's room. Thankfully, she was a heavy sleeper, to his bedroom. He opened the closet that still held Sarah's clothes, organized exactly as she'd left them. Sweaters arranged by color dresses, hanging in order of formality, casual clothes folded with military precision. He'd been meaning to donate them for months, but somehow never found the time or the courage. Take whatever you need, he said, pulling out a Stanford sweatshirt and a pair of jeans. Sarah was about your size, I think. Sarah was your wife? Cassandra asked, and her voice was gentler than he'd ever heard it. Yeah. She died 2 years ago. Cancer. I'm sorry. And she sounded like she meant it. That must be... I can't imagine. Some days are harder than others. He handed her the clothes. The bathroom is across the hall. Alex, let's see if I can find something that fits you. He rummaged through Emma's closet, finding clothes that were probably too small, but better than staying in wet things. A pink t-shirt with a unicorn on it, and a pair of purple sweatpants, not exactly masculine, but dry. I know it's not ideal, he said, offering them to Alex, who had followed them down the hallway. But my daughter is about your age, and these are the biggest things I could find. Alex looked at the unicorn shirt and grinned, the first genuine smile Daniel had seen from him. It's okay. I like unicorns. They're magical. Alex, Cassandra's voice carried a note of embarrassment. You don't have to. It's fine, Mom. Really. Alex took the clothes and disappeared into Emma's room to change. Cassandra stood in the hallway holding Sarah's clothes like they might bite her. In the dim light, with her perfect facade, washed away by rain and circumstance, she looked younger, more uncertain, more human. I'll be in the kitchen, Daniel said, making hot chocolate. Take your time. He retreated to the kitchen partly to give her privacy, and partly because he needed a moment to process what was happening. An hour ago, he'd been contemplating the ruins of his career. Now his boss was changing into his dead wife's clothes, while her son put on his daughter's unicorn shirt. If someone had pitched this scenario to him this morning, he would have suggested they seek professional help. The kitchen felt like a refuge, familiar and controllable. He could make hot chocolate. He could handle that simple task while his brain tried to catch up with reality. Water in the pot, cocoa powder, sugar, a splash of vanilla, the same recipe Sarah had taught him when they were newlyweds, and too poor to afford the fancy stuff. "Daddy!" Emma's voice came from the hallway, sleepy and confused. "I heard voices." Daniel turned to find his daughter in the kitchen doorway, rubbing her eyes and wearing the pajamas with the cartoon cats that she'd picked out herself at Target. Her hair was mussed from sleep, and she looked impossibly young and vulnerable. "Hey, princess, I thought you were asleep. The thunder woke me up, and then I heard talking." Her eyes widened as she took in the scene, the puddles of water on the floor, the sound of movement from down the hallway, her father making hot chocolate at almost 9 o'clock at night. "Are we having a party?" Before Daniel could answer, Alex appeared in the kitchen doorway wearing Emma's unicorn shirt and purple sweatpants, looking like the world's most serious 8-year-old unicorn enthusiast. Emma stared. Alex stared back. For a moment, Daniel wondered if he was about to witness some kind of child-based territorial dispute. Then Emma's face broke into a delighted grin. "I love your shirt," she announced. "That's my favorite unicorn." "Really?" Alex looked down at the sparkly creature on his chest. "It's pretty cool." "I'm Emma. This is my house. Are you staying for the storm?" "I'm Alex, and I think so. My mom's car broke down." "Cool. Do you want to see my room? I have more unicorns. And dragons. And a telescope that lets you see Saturn." "Emma," Daniel interrupted gently. "Alex might be tired. Can I see Saturn?" Alex asked Emma, his serious demeanor cracking to reveal genuine excitement. "Well, not tonight, because of the clouds, but I can show you pictures. Come on." And just like that, the two children disappeared down the hallway, chattering about planets and mythical creatures with the easy camaraderie that only kids could achieve. Daniel shook his head, amazed as always by children's ability to find friendship in the most unlikely circumstances. They seemed to have hit it off. Daniel turned to find Cassandra in the kitchen doorway, transformed. Sarah's Stanford sweatshirt hung loose on her frame, and the jeans were slightly too long, but the clothes fit well enough. Her hair was towel-dried and falling in soft waves around her face instead of its usual severe style. Without makeup, she looked younger, softer, less like a corporate predator, and more like, well, like someone's mom. "Kids are resilient," he said, stirring the hot chocolate. "They don't carry grudges the way adults do." "No," she agreed, and there was something wistful in her voice. "They don't." An awkward silence settled between them, filled with the sound of rain against the windows and distant laughter from Emma's room. Daniel poured hot chocolate into 2 mugs, one with a chip on the handle that Sarah had refused to throw away, another that Emma had made him at a pottery painting place for Father's Day. "Here," he said, offering her the chipped mug. "Thank you." Her fingers brushed his as she took it, and Daniel noticed they were still cold. "I should explain. About tonight, I mean. About why we're here. You don't owe me an explanation." "I think I do." She wrapped her hands around the mug like it was a lifeline. "Alex and I went to dinner after work. Nothing fancy, just that little Mexican place on South First. When we came out, the car wouldn't start. AAA said they couldn't get to us for hours because of the storm, and every rideshare app showed no drivers available. So you started walking? Not at first. We waited in the restaurant for almost an hour, but Alex was getting anxious about the storm, and She paused, taking a sip of hot chocolate. I was getting frustrated. I'm not used to being stranded. I'm used to having solutions, backup plans, people who can fix problems immediately. But sometimes storms don't care about your backup plans. No, she said quietly. They don't. So we started walking. I thought maybe we could find a hotel or at least get to a busier street where we might have better luck with ride shares. But the storm hit faster than I expected, and Alex was scared, and I realized I had no idea what I was doing. Daniel studied her face in the soft kitchen light. This wasn't the Cassandra Blake he knew, the one who commanded boardrooms and crushed proposals with surgical precision. This was someone's mother caught off guard by circumstances beyond her control. How did you end up here specifically? We were walking through your neighborhood when the worst of it hit. Alex was crying, and I was panicking, honestly. Then I saw your lights through the rain, and I remembered the address from your employee file. I know it sounds crazy showing up at a subordinate's house in the middle of the night, but I was desperate. Not crazy, Daniel said. Human. The word seemed to surprise her. She looked at him over the rim of her mug, those steel gray eyes showing something he'd never seen before. Vulnerability, maybe even gratitude. I want to apologize, she said suddenly, for this afternoon. The way I handled your presentation was unprofessional. Daniel nearly choked on his hot chocolate. Unprofessional. I was unnecessarily harsh. Your proposal had merit, and I should have provided constructive feedback instead of... She trailed off, searching for words. Instead of publicly executing me. Yes. She winced. That's exactly what I did, isn't it? I executed you in front of the entire team. Pretty much. I'm sorry. That's not who I want to be. That's not the kind of leader I want to be. The confession hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Daniel found himself studying this woman, who had turned his world upside down twice in one day, first by destroying his dreams, now by revealing her humanity. Why? He asked. Why were you so... harsh? Cassandra was quiet for a long moment, staring into her mug like it might contain answers. From down the hallway came the sound of children's laughter, proof that at least some relationships could be simple and immediate. Because, she said finally, you reminded me of someone I used to be. Someone who believed that good intentions and hard work were enough. Someone who thought the world was fair, that merit mattered more than politics, that doing the right thing would always be rewarded. She looked up at him. And I've spent the last 10 years learning how naive that person was. So you decided to crush that naivety in me. I decided to save you from the disappointment I went through. I thought if I could make you understand how the real world works, harsh, unforgiving, focused on results rather than intentions, I could spare you the pain of learning it slowly. Daniel struggled for words. That's incredibly condescending. Yes, she agreed. It is, and I'm sorry for that too. Thunder crashed overhead closer this time, and the lights flickered ominously. From Emma's room came a small shriek followed immediately by laughter. Apparently, the storm was adding drama to whatever adventure the children had created. Can I ask you something? Daniel said. Of course. Do you have friends, I mean real friends? People you can call when your car breaks down, when you need help, when you're scared? The question seemed to catch her off guard. She opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. I have colleagues, professional relationships, people who are useful. That's not what I asked. No, she said quietly. I don't have friends. Not real ones. When you're the CEO, when you're the person who has to make the hard decisions, who has to fire people and cut budgets and choose profits over people, friendship becomes complicated. Lonely. Very lonely. And the admission seemed to surprise her as much as it surprised him. But loneliness is the price of leadership. At least that's what I tell myself. What about Alex? Does he have friends? Some. But it's hard for him too. Being the CEO's son comes with its own challenges. Other parents treat him differently, either trying to curry favor or keeping their distance. Other kids sometimes resent him for things he can't control. Like having unicorn shirts, Daniel asked with a slight smile. That earned him the first genuine laugh he'd ever heard from Cassandra Blake. It was rusty, like she was out of practice, but warm and real. He's a good kid, she said. Better than I deserve, probably. Patient with my long hours, understanding when I miss school events. Forgiving when I'm too tired or stressed to be the mother he needs. Sounds familiar. Your daughter seems wonderful. Confident, kind, curious about the world. She's amazing. Sometimes I think she's raising me instead of the other way around. Single parenting is... She paused. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. And I've restructured failing companies and negotiated hostile takeovers. Yeah. But at least with hostile takeovers, you can use spreadsheets and logic. Kids operate on a completely different system. Magic and unicorns and hot chocolate at 9 o'clock at night. Exactly. They shared another moment of understanding the storm raging outside while they stood in the warm kitchen, finding common ground in the universal struggles of parenthood. It was surreal, Daniel thought. 6 hours ago, this woman had been his professional nemesis. Now she was someone he could relate to, someone who understood the weight of trying to be everything for a child who depended on you completely. Can I ask you something now? Cassandra said. Fair's fair. Your proposal this afternoon, the sustainability initiative, it wasn't just about business for you, was it? Daniel considered deflecting. Giving a corporate safe answer about market opportunities and competitive advantages. But something about the night, about the storm, about seeing this powerful woman reduced to human dimensions made him choose honesty instead. No, he said. It wasn't just about business. Emma's going to inherit the world we're creating. She's going to have to live with the consequences of every corner we cut. Every environmental problem we ignore, every short-term profit we choose over long-term responsibility. I wanted to build something she could be proud of, something that might make her future a little brighter. You really believe we can make a difference? One company, one initiative. I have to believe it, because the alternative is accepting that we're leaving our children a broken world, and there's nothing we can do about it. And I can't live with that. Cassandra nodded slowly, and Daniel could see her processing his words, weighing them against her own beliefs and experiences. In business school, she said, they teach you that sentiment is the enemy of good decision-making, that emotions cloud judgment, that feelings are liabilities. Do you believe that? I did. For a long time I did. But tonight... She gestured around the kitchen toward the sound of children playing in the storm. Tonight, I'm wondering if maybe the opposite is true. Maybe the inability to feel, to connect, to care about something beyond quarterly reports. Maybe that's the real liability. Before Daniel could respond, Emma's voice echoed down the hallway. Daddy Alex wants to know if we have any marshmallows for the hot chocolate. Check the pantry, he called back. Top shelf. More laughter, more running footsteps. The easy chaos of children finding joy in simple things. They're going to be wired for hours, Cassandra observed. Probably, but it's Friday night and there's a storm. Some rules are made to be broken. I don't break rules. Maybe you should try it sometime. She looked at him with those steel-gray eyes, and for a moment, Daniel thought he saw something shift in her expression. As if the idea of breaking rules, of letting go of the rigid control that defined her professional life was both terrifying and tempting. The lights flickered again more insistently this time, and stayed dim for several seconds before brightening. Outside, the storm showed no signs of letting up. If anything, it seemed to be gaining strength, the wind howling like something alive and angry. "How long do these storms usually last?" Cassandra asked. "Could be hours. Texas weather is unpredictable. But don't worry, you're welcome to stay as long as you need to." "I couldn't impose." "You're not imposing. You're stranded. There's a difference." She nodded, though he could see the discomfort in her eyes. Cassandra Blake was a woman accustomed to being in control, to having solutions and backup plans and people who could fix problems with a phone call. Being dependent on others, especially on someone she'd treated poorly, was probably torture for her. Besides, Daniel added, Emma's having the time of her life. I haven't heard her laugh this much since... He paused. In a while. Alex, too. He's usually so serious, so worried about being perfect. Tonight he's just a kid. Maybe that's what we all need sometimes. A storm to wash away all the pretense and leave us with just the basics. Shelter, warmth, human kindness. When did you become so philosophical? Probably around the time my boss publicly humiliated me and then showed up at my door in a thunderstorm. Cassandra winced. I deserve that. Yeah, you do. But you also apologized, which is more than I expected. I'm full of surprises tonight. Apparently. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the storm and the distant sounds of childhood adventure. The kitchen felt warm and safe, a pocket of calm in the chaos of the night. Daniel found himself studying Cassandra's face in the soft light, noting details he'd never had the chance or reason to observe before. The way her eyes crinkled slightly at the corners when she smiled. The small scar on her chin that her makeup usually concealed. The fact that without her armor of perfect hair and power suits, she looked like someone he might actually like. Daddy? Emma's voice again this time, accompanied by rapid footsteps. We made a blanket fort in my room, and Alex wants to know if you want to see it. Daniel looked at Cassandra, who shrugged. When in Rome, she said. They followed the sounds of excitement down the hallway to Emma's room, where an impressive architectural feat awaited them. The children had draped blankets over chairs, the desk and the bed, creating an elaborate tunnel system lit by Emma's desk lamp and 2 flashlights. Pillows were scattered everywhere, creating cozy nooks and pathways through the fabric maze. Welcome to Fort Awesome, Emma announced, popping up from behind a pillow barricade. Alex designed the engineering and I picked the decorations. It's structurally sound, Alex said seriously, emerging from the depths of the fort, like a unicorn-shirted engineer. We tested all the joints and reinforced the stress points. Very impressive, Daniel said, crouching down to examine their work. This is definitely the finest blanket fort I've ever seen. Can we camp out in here tonight? Emma asked. Please, it's like an adventure. Daniel looked at Cassandra, who was staring at the fort with an expression of wonder as if she'd never seen anything quite like it, which he realized she probably hadn't. When was the last time Cassandra Blake had gotten on her hands and knees to crawl through a blanket fort? When was the last time she'd done anything purely for the joy of it? I think that's up to Alex's mom, Daniel said diplomatically. All eyes turned to Cassandra, who looked suddenly uncertain. The weight of parental decision-making, of being responsible for someone else's happiness, was written across her face. She started, then stopped. We should probably... Please, Mom. Alex's voice was soft but hopeful. It's just pretend camping, and the storm is still really bad outside. Emma joined the campaign. We have extra sleeping bags and pillows, and I promise we'll be quiet. You've never been quiet a day in your life, Daniel said to Emma, earning a giggle. But I could try. Cassandra looked around the room at the elaborate fort, at her son's hopeful face, at Emma's obvious excitement. Daniel could see the internal struggle playing out in her expression. The CEO who needed to maintain schedules and control versus the mother who wanted to give her child joy. Okay, she said finally, but just for tonight, and only because of the storm. The children erupted in cheers, immediately disappearing back into their fabric kingdom to plan the details of their adventure. Cassandra watched them go with a mixture of amusement and terror. I have no idea what I just agreed to, she said. Fun, Daniel said. You just agreed to fun. I'm not sure I remember how to do fun. Lucky for you, you have 2 expert consultants. As if to prove his point, Emma's head popped out of the fort again. Do you have any snacks? Adventures require snacks. It's a rule. I'll see what I can find, Daniel said. He headed back to the kitchen, Cassandra following. The domestic normalcy of the moment struck him as he opened cabinets looking for child-appropriate camping food. An hour ago, making snacks for his daughter and the CEO's son would have been unimaginable. Now it felt natural, like this was something they'd done 100 times before. Crackers, cheese apple slices, he said, assembling supplies. The basic food groups according to Emma. Alex usually eats dinner at 7:30 sharp, in bed by 8:30, with exactly 1 story, Cassandra said, watching him work. This is completely off-script. Sometimes off-script is good. Sometimes off-script is exactly what we need. Is that your parenting philosophy, off-script? My parenting philosophy is whatever works and doesn't cause permanent damage. It's not very scientific, but it's gotten us this far. Sarah would have been better at this, Cassandra said suddenly, then looked surprised that she'd spoken the thought aloud. Daniel paused in his cheese slicing. Better at what? All of it. Being spontaneous, going with the flow, letting kids be kids. She would have known the right thing to do. Maybe. But Sarah isn't here and you are. And you just made a decision that's going to give Alex one of the best nights of his childhood. That's not nothing. How do you do it? She asked. How do you make it look so easy? Are you kidding? I have no idea what I'm doing most of the time. Last week, Emma asked me to help her with math homework, and I had to secretly Google 4th grade multiplication because I'd completely forgotten how to do it. Really? Really? Parenting is mostly improvisation and hoping you don't screw up too badly. That's terrifying. That's honest. They carried the snacks back to Emma's room, where the children had somehow expanded their fort to cover even more territory. Negotiations were underway about sleeping arrangements, with Emma advocating for a circular formation and Alex preferring parallel lines for optimal space efficiency. Food delivery, Daniel announced, and both children abandoned their architectural discussions to descend on the snacks like hungry wolves. This is the best storm ever, Emma declared through a mouthful of crackers. Definitely, Alex agreed, and Daniel noticed that the serious, worried expression the boy had worn when he arrived was completely gone, replaced by the simple joy of a child having an adventure. Thunder crashed overhead again, a reminder that the outside world was still chaotic and dangerous. But inside Emma's room, with blankets strung between furniture and children planning their camping adventure, it felt like the safest place in the world. I should probably try to call a tow truck again, Cassandra said, but without much conviction. Good luck getting through in this weather, Daniel said. Most services won't come out until the storm passes. Right. Of course. She looked around the room, taking in the domestic scene. This is all very unexpected. The best things usually are. As if summoned by their conversation, the lights flickered once more and then went out, completely plunging the room into darkness. There was a moment of silence, then Emma's voice, excited rather than frightened. Now it's a real adventure. The darkness that enveloped Emma's room wasn't the oppressive blackness of fear, but rather the cozy dimness of adventure. The children's flashlights came alive immediately, creating dancing circles of light that transformed the blanket fort into something magical, a secret world where shadows played across fabric walls and ordinary furniture became mysterious landmarks. "This is perfect," Emma whispered, as if speaking too loudly might break the spell. "It's like we're really camping in the wilderness." Alex nodded solemnly, adjusting his flashlight to illuminate the architectural marvel they'd created. "Emergency lighting is crucial for any expedition. We're properly equipped now." Daniel found himself smiling in the darkness. While most adults would be reaching for their phones to check the power company's estimated restoration time, these two had immediately embraced the outage as an enhancement to their adventure. There was something profound in that response, something he'd forgotten about the resilience of childhood. "I'll go find more flashlights," he said, but Cassandra's voice stopped him. "Wait." She was sitting cross-legged on the floor beside the fort's entrance, and in the gentle glow of the children's lights, she looked younger than he'd ever seen her. "Do we really need more light? This feels right somehow." Emma poked her head out of the fort, her hair tousled and her eyes bright with excitement. "You could come in with us. There's room." Alex measured everything. "I did," Alex confirmed with the pride of an engineer whose calculations had proven correct. "The structural integrity can support 4 occupants with minimal compression of personal space." Cassandra looked at Daniel, and he could see the internal war playing out in her expression. The CEO who scheduled every minute of her day versus the mother whose son was inviting her into his world of wonder. The woman who controlled boardrooms versus the person who was learning, perhaps for the first time in years, what it meant to let go. "I don't really know how to do blanket forts," she admitted quietly. "It's easy," Emma said with the confidence of an expert. "You just crawl in and be comfortable. There's no wrong way to do it." And perhaps that was exactly what Cassandra needed to hear, that there was no performance metric for this, no way to fail. No quarterly report on blanket fort effectiveness. Just the simple invitation to exist in a space where perfection wasn't required. Daniel watched as she made her decision. It started with a tentative movement toward the fort's entrance, then became more committed as Alex reached out to guide her inside. Soon both adults were sitting inside the Fabric Kingdom flashlights, creating a warm amber glow that made everything feel intimate and safe. "See?" Emma said, settling between them with the satisfaction of a successful hostess. "It's cozy." "It is," Cassandra agreed, and there was genuine surprise in her voice. "It's actually quite comfortable. The angle of the blanket creates optimal headroom while maintaining structural stability." Alex explained, his serious tone making his unicorn shirt somehow even more endearing. "And the pillow placement provides both comfort and sound dampening." "You really thought this through," Daniel said, impressed despite himself. "Alex thinks everything through," Cassandra said, and there was both pride and sadness in her voice. "Sometimes I worry he thinks too much, that he doesn't get to just be a kid often enough." "Tonight he's being a kid," Daniel observed, watching as Alex and Emma began arranging additional pillows with the focused intensity of interior designers. "Tonight he's perfect exactly as he is." The storm continued its assault on the house, but inside the fort, It felt distant, muffled by layers of fabric and the insulating effect of shared warmth. The four of them existed in their own pocket of the universe, separate from the chaos outside and the complicated realities that would return with the morning. "Can we tell stories?" Emma asked, settling into her nest of pillows with the flashlight held beneath her chin for dramatic effect. "Scary stories, but not too scary." "I don't know any stories," Alex said apologetically. "That's okay, you can make them up, that's the best kind." Daniel found himself looking at Cassandra in the dim light, wondering if she remembered what it was like to make things up, to create worlds from nothing but imagination and words. In the corporate environment, making things up was called lying, or spinning, or managing the narrative. But here, in a blanket fort with children who believed in magic, making things up was just another form of play. "Once upon a time," Emma began, her voice taking on the cadence of a born storyteller, "there was a brave unicorn who lived in a castle made of clouds." As she spun her tale, complete with dragons who were actually misunderstood and princesses who saved themselves, Daniel noticed Cassandra listening with an attention he'd never seen her give to quarterly reports or board presentations. She was completely present, completely engaged, as if this 8-year-old's imagination was the most important thing in the world. "And then what happened?" Alex asked when Emma paused for dramatic effect. "Well," Emma said, looking around the circle, "that's where you come in. Everyone gets to add a piece." Alex considered this seriously. "The unicorn discovered that the dragon was only mean because he was lonely. So the unicorn decided to be his friend." "Perfect!" Emma exclaimed. "Mom, you're next." Cassandra looked startled at being called Mom by someone else's daughter, but she didn't correct it. Instead, she thought for a moment before adding, "The friendship between the unicorn and the dragon was so strong that it created a rainbow bridge connecting their two worlds, and soon everyone could visit back and forth whenever they wanted." Emma clapped her hands in delight. "Daddy, your turn." Daniel felt the weight of expectation, the pressure to contribute something worthy to this collaborative creation. But then he looked at the faces around him, two children completely absorbed in the magic of storytelling, and a woman who was discovering that imagination didn't require a business plan, and the words came easily. And they all learned that the best adventures happen when you're brave enough to open your door to strangers in storms, because sometimes strangers become the most important people in your life. The fort fell quiet for a moment, the metaphor hanging in the air between them. Emma, oblivious to the adult undercurrents, simply smiled and continued the story. But Daniel caught Cassandra's eye in the flashlight glow, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of the truth hidden in his fictional addition. They were strangers who had opened doors to each other tonight, literally and figuratively. The storm had stripped away their professional roles, their defenses, their carefully constructed barriers, leaving them just as they were, two parents trying to do right by their children, two people learning that kindness could exist even in the aftermath of conflict. "The end," Emma declared as their collaborative tale reached its natural conclusion. "That was the best story ever. Can we do another one?" "Maybe later," Daniel said gently. "What do you think we should do now? Truth or dare?" Emma suggested immediately. "Absolutely not," Cassandra said so quickly that everyone laughed. "How about 20 questions?" Alex suggested. "But not the regular kind, the kind where you learn interesting things about people." "Like what?" Emma asked, intrigued. "Like, what's the bravest thing you've ever done, or what's something that makes you happy that other people might think is weird?" Daniel was struck by the thoughtfulness of the questions. At 8 years old, Alex was already more interested in understanding people's inner worlds than most adults ever were. It made him wonder what kind of conversations this serious boy had with his mother, what kind of example Cassandra set when she thought no one was watching. "I'll go first," Emma volunteered. "The bravest thing I ever did was when I stood up to Marcus Peterson when he was being mean to the new girl at school. He's bigger than me and kind of scary, but I told him to stop anyway." "That was very brave," Cassandra said, and Daniel could hear the genuine admiration in her voice. Standing up for someone else when it's hard is one of the most important things a person can do. "What about you, Alex?" Emma asked. Alex thought carefully before answering. "The bravest thing I ever did was tell my mom that I didn't want to go to boarding school. She thought it would be good for me, but I was scared to be away from her. I almost didn't say anything because I didn't want to disappoint her." Daniel felt his chest tighten. He glanced at Cassandra and saw pain flicker across her face, the realization that her son had been afraid to express his needs, afraid of disappointing her, even when it came to his own well-being. "I'm glad you told me," she said softly. "You could never disappoint me by being honest about how you feel." Really, honesty is always braver than pretending everything is fine when it's not." The conversation continued, weaving between light moments and deeper revelations. Emma shared that what made her happiest was reading books under her covers with a flashlight, even though she was supposed to be sleeping. Alex admitted that he loved watching cooking shows and dreaming about making fancy dinners for his mother. With each exchange, the barriers between them dissolved a little more. "Your turn, Daddy," Emma said eventually. Daniel considered the question about what made him happy that others might think was weird. There were several answers he could give: his collection of vintage science fiction novels, his habit of talking to Sarah's picture when he was making difficult decisions, his genuine enjoyment of Emma's often off-key singing. But in the intimacy of the blanket fort, with Cassandra listening as intently as the children, he chose a deeper truth. "Dancing with your mom to music that only I can hear," he said, looking at Emma. "Sometimes when I'm doing dishes or cleaning the house, I put on music and imagine that Mom is there dancing with me. It makes me feel less lonely and helps me remember the good times." Emma smiled, but it was a watery smile full of understanding beyond her years. "I do that too sometimes, but I dance with both of you in my imagination." The moment threatened to become too heavy, weighted with grief and loss, but Cassandra's voice gently redirected them. "My turn," she asked, and when everyone nodded, she took a breath that seemed to cost her something significant. "What makes me happy that others might think is weird is reading Alex bedtime stories. Even though he's probably too old for them now, even though my schedule is always crazy, those 10 minutes when we read together are the best part of my day. I look forward to them more than board meetings or company dinners or anything else that's supposed to be important." Alex looked at his mother with something approaching wonder. "Really, I thought you just did it because you felt like you had to." "Never," Cassandra said firmly. "I do it because I love spending that time with you. Because those stories give us a world we can share, just the two of us." "I love story time too," Alex said, and the relief in his voice was palpable. "I never want to get too old for it." "Then we won't let you," Emma declared with the certainty of someone who had never encountered a problem that couldn't be solved with sufficient determination. "Age is just a number anyway. My daddy still likes cartoons." "Guilty as charged," Daniel admitted. The conversation continued to flow, touching on favorite foods and least favorite chores, on dreams for the future and memories from the past. But underneath the seemingly casual exchanges, something more significant was happening. These four people, brought together by professional conflict and meteorological coincidence, were creating connection. Real, honest human connection, of a type that was increasingly rare in a world of careful professional personas and social media facades. "I have an idea," Emma said during a lull in the conversation. "Let's play a game where we each say something nice about everyone else. But it has to be something true, not just being polite." "That sounds lovely," Cassandra said, though Daniel could see a flicker of nervousness in her expression. Compliments in the corporate world were strategic, carefully calculated to achieve specific objectives. This kind of honest appreciation was foreign territory. "I'll start with Alex," Emma announced. "I think you're really smart, but not in a show-off way. You're smart in a way that makes other people feel smarter too, and you have kind eyes." Alex ducked his head, clearly pleased but embarrassed by the praise. "Thank you, Emma, I think you're brave in a way that makes other people want to be brave too. And you make everything more fun just by being yourself." The children turned expectantly to the adults, who found themselves in the surprisingly vulnerable position of offering genuine compliments to people they barely knew. Or in Daniel and Cassandra's case, people they thought they knew but were rapidly discovering they didn't understand at all. "Cassandra," Daniel said, surprising himself by using her first name instead of the formal address he'd always employed. "You're an incredibly devoted mother. Watching you with Alex tonight, seeing how much you love him, and how hard you work to give him good experiences, it's clear that under all the corporate armor, you have a huge heart." Cassandra looked stunned, as if no one had ever acknowledged her maternal devotion before. In the flashlight glow, her eyes seemed suspiciously bright. "Daniel," she said, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. "You're one of the most genuinely kind people I've ever met. Not performative kindness, not strategic niceness, but real bone-deep goodness. Tonight, when you had every reason to slam the door in my face, you chose compassion instead. That takes a special kind of character." The fort fell quiet, except for the continuing storm outside. The compliments hung in the air between them, honest and specific, and more meaningful than any professional recognition either of them had ever received. "This is nice," Alex said quietly. "I wish we could do this more often." "Do what?" his mother asked. "Just be with people. Talk about real things. Not worry about being perfect or impressive or anything except just being ourselves." The simple wisdom of it hit Daniel like a physical force. When was the last time he'd had a conversation, a real conversation with another adult, about anything that mattered? When was the last time he'd felt seen and understood, rather than just tolerated or professionally evaluated? "Me too," Emma agreed. "I like it when grown-ups talk to kids like we're real people, instead of just little grown-ups in training." "You are real people," Cassandra said. "Sometimes I think children are more real than adults. More honest, more willing to feel things fully, more open to wonder and possibility." "Then why do grown-ups stop being that way?" Alex asked with the directness that only children could manage. It was a question that cut to the heart of everything, and Daniel found himself looking at Cassandra in the dim light, wondering if she was thinking the same thing he was. When had they stopped being open to wonder? When had they started calculating every interaction, weighing every word, building walls instead of bridges? "I don't know," Cassandra admitted. "Fear, maybe. The world can be disappointing, and it feels safer to expect less to protect yourself from getting hurt." "But if you protect yourself from getting hurt, don't you also protect yourself from getting happy?" Emma asked with devastating logic. "Yes," Daniel said quietly. "I think you do." "That seems like a bad trade," Alex observed. "It is a bad trade," his mother agreed. "I'm just realizing that tonight." The conversation that followed was unlike anything Daniel had experienced in his adult life. No agenda, no performance, no careful navigation of professional hierarchies or social expectations. Just four people talking honestly about life and fear and hope and the small moments that made existence bearable. The children shared their worries about growing up and losing their sense of magic. The adults talked about the weight of responsibility and the loneliness of decision-making. At some point, the conversation gave way to comfortable silence. Emma curled up against Daniel's side, her breathing becoming deep and regular. Alex leaned against his mother, fighting sleep, but losing the battle. The flashlights dimmed as their batteries weakened, creating an even cozier atmosphere in their fabric sanctuary. "They're asleep," Cassandra whispered, looking down at Alex with an expression of such tenderness that Daniel felt like he was intruding on something private. "Emma, too," he confirmed, stroking his daughter's hair. "It's been a big night for them. For all of us. All." They sat in the growing dimness, each lost in their own thoughts. The storm outside seemed to be weakening, the thunder more distant, the rain less violent against the windows. Eventually the crisis would pass. The power would return, and the complications of their real lives would reassert themselves. But for now, they existed in this temporary pocket of peace. "Daniel," Cassandra said so quietly, he almost didn't hear her. "Yeah. Thank you. For tonight. For..." She gestured around the fort, at the sleeping children, at the impossible situation they'd found themselves in. "For showing me that there are still good people in the world. Thank you for trusting me with something precious," he replied, looking at Alex's peaceful face. "For letting me see who you really are underneath all the corporate warrior stuff. I'd forgotten who I was underneath it all. I think I needed tonight to remember. We all need reminding sometimes that we're human beings first, everything else second. Is it terrible that I don't want this to end? That I know tomorrow we'll have to go back to our real lives and this..." She waved her hand to encompass the fort, the connection, the possibility of being different than they were. "This will just be a strange story we tell ourselves about the night the storm changed everything." Daniel considered her question seriously. Was it terrible to want to hold on to moments of genuine connection? Was it naive to hope that people could change that understanding, could bridge the gaps between different worlds? "No," he said finally. "It's human, and maybe that's enough. Maybe we don't have to go back to exactly who we were before." "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe tomorrow doesn't have to erase tonight. Maybe we can choose to remember that the Ice Queen is also a devoted mother. Maybe I can remember that behind every harsh decision is a person carrying more weight than anyone realizes. Maybe we can both remember that kindness is always an option even when it's difficult." Cassandra was quiet for a long moment, and Daniel wondered if he'd overstepped, if he'd pushed too hard for meaning in what might have been just a temporary suspension of reality. "You know," she said eventually, "I've been thinking about your proposal, the Sustainability Initiative." Daniel's stomach clenched. Even here, even now, she going to remind him of his professional failure. "I was wrong," she continued. "Not about the timeline or the budget, those concerns were legitimate. But I was wrong about the vision, about the value of caring about something beyond immediate returns. I was wrong to dismiss passion as weakness." "Cassandra, let me finish, please." She shifted carefully, trying not to wake Alex. "I've spent so many years focused on short-term profits, on quarterly reports, on keeping shareholders happy, that I forgot companies are made up of people. People who want to believe they're working towards something meaningful, something that matters beyond just making money. Where are you going with this? I want to revisit your proposal. Not the version you presented that one really did have problems. But the core idea, the vision of building something sustainable and responsible. I want to work with you to develop something that addresses my concerns while preserving your passion. Daniel felt his breath catch. Was she offering him a second chance, a collaboration, instead of a dismissal? Why, Mom? He asked. Because Alex is going to inherit the world we're building just like Emma is. Because maybe it's time I stopped being so afraid of feeling something about the work I do, and because she looked around the blanket fort at the sleeping children, at the evidence of what was possible when people chose connection over conflict. Because tonight reminded me that there are more important things than being right all the time. What would that look like, a collaboration, I mean? I don't know yet. We'd have to figure it out together. But I think it might start with approaching it as partners instead of as boss and subordinate. As two people who want to build something good for our children's future. Partners, Daniel repeated, testing the word. Partners, if you're willing. Before he could answer, the lights flickered back on, sudden and harsh, after the gentle dimness of their flashlight world. Both children stirred, blinking in the brightness, the spell of their fort adventure, broken by the return of electricity and the reminder that the outside world still existed. Is the storm over? Emma asked sleepily. Daniel listened to the sounds from outside. The rain had softened to a gentle patter, and the thunder was now distant rumbling. I think so, Princess. Do we have to leave the fort now? Alex asked, and there was real disappointment in his voice. Not yet, Cassandra said, reaching over to turn off the overhead light, restoring some of the fort's magic. We can stay a little longer. But even as she said it, Daniel could see reality beginning to reassert itself in her expression. The responsibilities waiting at home, the complications of what had happened tonight, the impossibility of sustaining this moment of connection in the harsh light of Monday morning. Mom, Alex said, settling back against his mother's side. Can we do this again sometime? Have an adventure like this? Cassandra started, then stopped. Daniel could see her internal struggle, the war between the CEO who scheduled every moment and the mother who wanted to give her son joy. I would like that very much. With Emma and Mr. Hayes, too, if they'd want to. We'd want to, Emma said immediately, apparently less asleep than she'd appeared. Right, Daddy. Right. Daniel agreed, though he wasn't sure what he was agreeing to. Friendship with his boss, regular fort-building sessions, a complete reconstruction of their professional relationship. All of it seemed equally impossible and equally necessary. I should probably call that tow truck now, Cassandra said reluctantly. The storm's passing and morning isn't that far away. Of course, Daniel said, though he felt the same reluctance to end this strange, wonderful night. As Cassandra made arrangements for her car, as the children reluctantly began dismantling their architectural masterpiece as the ordinary world prepared to reclaim them all, Daniel found himself holding on to her words. Partners, if you're willing. He was willing, despite everything that had happened, despite the vast differences in their positions and perspectives, despite the impossibility of bridging the gap between who they'd been this afternoon and who they might become tomorrow. He was willing to try. Because Emma was right, storms did make everything clean afterward. And sometimes, if you were brave enough to open your door to strangers, if you were willing to let down your guard and admit you didn't have all the answers, if you could remember that, underneath all the roles and titles and protective armor, everyone was just a person trying to do their best in an uncertain world. Sometimes storms brought exactly what you needed. even if you didn't know you needed it until it knocked on your door. The tow truck arrived at dawn, its yellow lights cutting through the gray morning mist like a beacon calling them back to reality. Daniel stood at his front window, coffee mug in hand, watching as the driver attached chains to Cassandra's BMW with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd pulled dozens of vehicles out of similar predicaments. The storm had left its mark on the neighborhood, fallen branches scattered across lawns, overflowing gutters, the occasional piece of debris that spoke to the violence of the night before. Behind him, the house bore evidence of their unexpected adventure. Emma's room looked like a textile explosion, blankets and pillows still arranged in the elaborate fort that had housed their midnight revelations. In the kitchen, 4 coffee mugs sat in the sink, 2 regular-sized, 2 child-sized with cartoon characters, a domestic tableau that would have been impossible to imagine 12 hours ago. The driver says it's probably just a flooded engine, Cassandra said, appearing beside him at the window. She'd changed back into her own clothes, though they were still damp and wrinkled from the storm. Without Sarah's casual sweatshirt and jeans, she looked more like the CEO he recognized, but something fundamental had shifted. The sharp edges were softer now, the corporate armor less perfectly fitted. "That's good news," Daniel replied, though he found himself reluctant to see her go. The morning felt fragile, suspended between the magic of the night before and the uncertain territory of what came next. "Alex is helping Emma rebuild the fort." She continued a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Apparently, the structural integrity was compromised during the night, and they need to reinforce the eastern corridor." "Of course they do." Daniel shook his head, marveling at the children's ability to find engineering challenges in play. "I'm pretty sure Alex is going to grow up to build actual bridges or design space stations or something equally impressive. He wants to be an architect," Cassandra said, and there was pride in her voice mixed with something that might have been wistfulness. "He's been drawing building plans since he was 5. Our refrigerator is covered with sketches of impossible structures, houses that float in the air, underground cities, bridges that span entire continents." "That's incredible. Does he take after you or his father?" A shadow crossed Cassandra's face so quickly that Daniel almost missed it. His father wasn't really present. Alex's imagination, his kindness, his ability to see possibility where others see problems, that's all him. The weight of single parenthood, Daniel realized. She carried it just like he did, the constant awareness that you were responsible for shaping a complete human being with only your own flawed understanding to guide you. The fear that your mistakes would become their limitations, that your damage would become their inheritance. "He's an amazing kid," Daniel said. "Whatever you're doing, it's working." "Some days I'm not so sure. I travel too much, work too late, miss too many school events. Last month I had to send my assistant to his parent-teacher conference because I was stuck in meetings. And yet he chose to trust you when he was scared about boarding school. He knew you'd listen, that his feelings mattered to you. That doesn't happen by accident." Cassandra turned from the window to study his face as if trying to determine whether his words were genuine or merely polite reassurance. "You really think so?" "I know so. Emma has that same confidence, the knowledge that she's loved unconditionally, that her voice matters. It's the most important gift you can give a child." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the tow truck driver work while the morning light gradually strengthened. Somewhere behind them, their children were collaborating on architectural wonders, their laughter punctuating the quiet of the post-storm dawn. It felt surreal, this domestic interlude with a woman who 24 hours ago had been his professional nemesis. "About what we discussed last night," Cassandra said carefully. "The partnership. I meant what I said, but I want you to know there's no pressure. If you'd prefer to keep things professional, I'd understand." Daniel considered her words, recognizing the offer of an exit ramp, a way to return to the familiar territories of boss and subordinate, without the complications of actual collaboration. It would be safer, certainly, easier to navigate. But Emma's words echoed in his mind. If you protect yourself from getting hurt, don't you also protect yourself from getting happy? I'm interested, he said. More than interested. But I have conditions. Such as, we do this as equals, not CEO and mid-level employee, but as two people with different expertise working toward a common goal. That means my ideas get the same consideration as yours, and my concerns carry the same weight. Fair enough. What else? We include other voices. This can't be just about what you and I think is right. We need input from the people who'll be implementing these changes, from the communities our decisions will affect. Real collaboration, not just consultation. Cassandra nodded slowly. That's not how I usually work. I know. That's why it's a condition. You're asking me to give up a significant amount of control. I'm asking you to share it. There's a difference. She was quiet for a long moment, and Daniel could see her processing the implications. Control had been her tool for survival in the corporate world, her way of ensuring outcomes, of protecting herself and her company from the chaos of uncertain variables. Sharing that control meant accepting vulnerability, trusting others to care as much about success as she did. Okay, she said finally. Equal partners, collaborative process. What's your third condition? We remember last night. Whatever happens with this project, whatever challenges we face, we remember that we're human beings first. We remember at the point isn't to be right or to win, but to build something good. That might be the hardest condition of all. Probably, but it's also the most important. The tow truck driver knocked on the door, then clipboard in hand, ready to discuss next steps and payment arrangements. The spell of their private conversation broke, replaced by the practical realities of insurance forms and repair estimates. But as Cassandra dealt with the logistics, Daniel found himself optimistic in a way he hadn't been in months. Not just about the project they'd discussed, but about the possibility of change, of growth, of becoming better than they'd been. Daddy, Emma's voice carried down the hallway. Come see what we built. It's even better than before. Coming, princess, he called back, then turned to Cassandra. Want to see the architectural marvel before you go? I wouldn't miss it. They made their way to Emma's room, where the children had indeed created something impressive. The original blanket fort had been expanded and refined, with clearly defined chambers connected by fabric tunnels. Signs hung at various entrance points, written in Emma's careful cursive and Alex's precise printing: Fort Awesome Command Center, Snack Station, Emergency Planning Room. This is remarkable, Cassandra said, and her admiration was genuine. You've created a multifunctional space with clear organizational principles. Alex designed the layout, Emma said proudly, and I added the decoration committee recommendations. The decoration committee? Me, Emma grinned. I'm the whole committee. Alex emerged from one of the tunnels, his hair tousled and his face bright with the satisfaction of successful engineering. We improved the load distribution and added redundant support systems. This version could withstand much stronger storms. Let's hope we don't have to test that theory, Daniel said. Can we keep it up? Emma asked. Please, at least until after school. Daniel looked around at the transformed room, at the evidence of collaboration and creativity and pure joy. It would be impractical to leave it standing. Emma would never be able to find her clothes or do her homework. But there was something precious about it, something worth preserving a little longer. Until after school, he agreed. But then we'll need to pack it away carefully so you can rebuild it again sometime. Can Alex come back and help rebuild it? Emma asked, then looked at Cassandra with hopeful eyes. Could he? We make a really good team. Cassandra glanced at Daniel, and he could see her navigating the social complexity of the request. Playdates between their children would mean continued contact between them, would make their professional relationship even more complicated. But Alex was looking at her with the same hopeful expression as Emma, and the memory of his laughter the night before was too fresh to ignore. I think that could be arranged, she said carefully, if Mr. Hayes doesn't mind. Daniel, he corrected gently. After last night, I think we're past formal titles, and of course I don't mind. Emma could use more friends, and Alex is welcome here any time. The smile that crossed Alex's face was radiant. Really? We could build even bigger forts, maybe one that goes into multiple rooms. Let's master single-room architecture first. Daniel laughed. A car honked outside the tow truck driver, ready to depart. The morning was moving forward, carrying them all toward their respective responsibilities and routines. But something had been established in Emma's transformed bedroom, some foundation laid that felt more solid than blankets and pillows. I should go, Cassandra said reluctantly. I have a 9 o'clock meeting and I need to change clothes and review my notes. Of course. Daniel followed her toward the front door, the children trailing behind. Alex, Cassandra said, crouching down to her son's level. Did you have fun last night? The best time ever, Alex said seriously. Even better than the Science Museum or the time we went to see the rockets. I'm glad. Sometimes the best adventures are the ones we don't plan. Can we have more unplanned adventures? Cassandra looked up at Daniel, and he could see her weighing the question, considering what kind of promises she was prepared to make. I think we can try to be more open to possibility, she said finally. More willing to say yes when opportunities for adventure present themselves. I'd like that, Alex said, then threw his arms around his mother in a fierce hug. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. More than all the stars in the sky. Emma, not to be outdone in affection, hugged Alex goodbye with the intensity of someone saying farewell to a dear friend. Thank you for helping me build the best fort ever, she said, and for being brave enough to wear unicorn shirts. Thank you for teaching me about unicorns and sharing your daddy and letting me be part of your adventure, Alex replied with the gravity of a diplomatic ambassador. At the door, Cassandra paused, seeming to struggle with how to appropriately thank someone for an experience that defied conventional social categories. How did you express gratitude for having your worldview shifted? Your assumptions challenged, your capacity for trust unexpectedly expanded. Daniel, she said finally, last night was... I don't have adequate words. Thank you for your kindness, your generosity, your willingness to see past our professional difficulties to the human need underneath. Thank you for trusting me with something precious, he replied, gesturing toward Alex, who was already in the car and waving enthusiastically through the window. And for showing me that people can change, that first impressions don't have to be final verdicts. About the project we discussed. Monday morning, Daniel said. We'll figure out the details Monday morning. Right now, you should focus on getting home and getting ready for your 9 o'clock. Right, Monday morning. She started toward the car, then turned back. Daniel, what you said about remembering we're human beings first, I'm going to try to hold on to that. In all my interactions, not just with you. It's harder than it sounds, he admitted, but worth it. I'm beginning to understand that. He watched from the doorway as she drove away, the tow truck leading her BMW down the street like a mechanical parade. Emma pressed against his side, yawning as the adrenaline of their adventure finally gave way to exhaustion. "That was the best storm ever," she said sleepily. "Was it? Definitely. We made new friends and built the greatest fort in history, and learned that sometimes the scariest people are actually really nice when you get to know them." "Sometimes," Daniel agreed. "But it takes courage to give them the chance. You were brave, Daddy. When you opened the door for them, though you were probably still sad about work." Emma's insight, as always, cut straight to the heart of things. He had been brave, though he hadn't thought of it in those terms at the time. Opening the door to Cassandra and Alex had required setting aside his hurt and anger, choosing compassion over self-protection. It had meant risking further humiliation for the sake of basic human decency. "We were all brave last night," he said, "even when we were scared." "Especially when we were scared," Emma corrected, and Daniel marveled again at his daughter's wisdom. The weekend that followed felt different, charged with possibility, in ways Daniel hadn't experienced in years. He and Emma dismantled the fort, carefully sorting and folding the blankets and pillows, like archaeologists preserving artifacts from an important dig. Emma insisted on drawing detailed diagrams of the fort's architecture, creating blueprints she could share with Alex for future construction projects. "We need to document everything," she explained with the seriousness of a research scientist, "so we can make it even better next time." "Next time assumes there will be a next time," Daniel pointed out gently. "There will be," Emma said with absolute certainty. "Some things you just know." Sunday evening found them at the grocery store restocking their pantry after the weekend's domestic adventures. Emma pushed the cart with the focused determination of someone on an important mission, while Daniel navigated the aisles with the distracted attention of someone whose mind was elsewhere. Tomorrow he would return to work, would face colleagues who had witnessed his professional humiliation, would navigate the complex territory of his evolving relationship with Cassandra. "Daddy," Emma said, as they stood in the checkout line, "are you nervous about tomorrow?" "A little," he admitted. "Things are going to be different at work now." "Different how?" "Well, your friend Alex's mom and I are going to try working together on something important. But it's complicated because she's my boss, and we haven't always agreed about things." Emma considered this seriously. "But you like each other now, right? After the fort, and the stories, and everything." "I think so, but liking someone and working with them successfully aren't always the same thing." "Why not?" It was a fair question, one that Daniel found difficult to answer in terms an 8-year-old would understand. How did you explain office politics and power dynamics, and the way professional relationships could be poisoned by ego and competition? How did you describe the fear of vulnerability that made people choose conflict over collaboration? "Sometimes grown-ups make things more complicated than they need to be," he said finally. "Sometimes we forget that we're all on the same team." "That's silly." "Yes," Daniel agreed. "It really is." Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly, the weather matching Daniel's mixture of anticipation and anxiety. He dropped Emma at school, listening to her chatter about an upcoming science project, while his mind wandered to the conversation he would need to have with Cassandra. Would she remember their late-night agreements in the harsh light of corporate Monday? Would the vulnerability they'd shared feel like a liability in the professional environment? The Meridian Industries parking garage felt the same as always, concrete and fluorescent lights, and the echo of footsteps on hard surfaces. But Daniel found himself noticing details he'd previously overlooked. The security guard's tired smile, the way morning light filtered through the glass walls of the lobby, the hopeful energy of people beginning another week of possibilities. The elevator ride to the 15th floor felt longer than usual, each floor marking his progress toward an uncertain future. When the doors opened, he stepped into the familiar hallway with its corporate artwork and motivational posters, breathing the recycled air that smelled of coffee and ambition and the faint anxiety that permeated all office buildings. Daniel, Sarah Rodriguez from marketing, intercepted him before he could reach his desk. "How are you feeling after Friday's meeting? That was pretty intense." The sympathy in her voice was genuine, but Daniel could see the curiosity lurking underneath. Office gossip was its own form of currency, and his public humiliation had undoubtedly been the subject of weekend speculation. "I'm fine," he said diplomatically. "These things happen." "But the way she just tore apart your presentation," Sarah shook her head. "I felt terrible for you. We all did." "I appreciate that. But I'm looking forward to moving past it." Sarah looked disappointed by his lack of dramatic detail, but nodded and moved on to her next potential source of information. Daniel made his way to his desk, noting the careful glances and whispered conversations that tracked his progress. By now, everyone in the office had heard some version of Friday's events. Some would be sympathetic, others would see his failure as an opportunity for their own advancement. Such was the nature of corporate ecosystems. His computer had barely finished booting up when his phone rang. The caller ID showed Cassandra's extension, and Daniel felt his pulse quicken. Here it was, the first test of whether their night of revelations had any lasting impact on their professional relationship. "Daniel, could you come to my office, please, when you have a moment?" Her tone was neutral, professional, giving no hint of their recent intimacy. But then again, this was a phone call that could be overheard, recorded, analyzed by anyone with access to the company's communication systems. Of course, she would maintain appropriate boundaries. "I'll be right there," he said. The walk to the executive floor felt like a journey through different atmospheric layers. The carpet grew thicker, the artwork more expensive, the very air seeming rarefied by proximity to power. Cassandra's assistant, a perfectly groomed woman named Janet, who managed the CEO's schedule with military precision, looked up as he approached. "Mr. Hayes, she's expecting you. Go right in." Daniel knocked on the familiar door, memories of Friday's execution flooding back, despite his efforts to focus on the future. But when Cassandra's voice called for him to enter, he straightened his shoulders and stepped into what might be the beginning of something unprecedented. Cassandra's office was exactly as he remembered: floor-to-ceiling windows, mahogany desk that could double as a small aircraft carrier, leather chairs arranged to create subtle power dynamics. But Cassandra herself looked different. The same perfectly tailored suit, the same controlled posture, but something in her eyes was softer, more accessible. "Daniel," she said, standing as he entered. "Thank you for coming up. Please sit." He chose the chair directly across from her desk, the one that put them on the most equal footing the room's architecture would allow. She sat as well, but instead of remaining behind her desk in the traditional position of authority, she moved to the chair beside his. "How was your weekend?" she asked, and the question seemed to carry more weight than casual politeness. "Good. Quiet. Emma and I took down the fort yesterday, but not before she created detailed blueprints for future reference. Alex did the same thing. I found him at the kitchen table this morning with graph paper and colored pencils calculating load distributions for multi-room fortifications." They shared a smile, and Daniel felt some of his tension ease. This was the Cassandra from Saturday night, the one who could laugh at her son's engineering obsessions and appreciate a child's approach to problem-solving. "How much trouble am I in for calling you an ice queen?" he asked, deciding to address the elephant in the room directly. "None," she said without hesitation. "That conversation taught me more about myself than I cared to learn, but it was necessary." Sometimes we need outside perspectives to see our own blind spots. Even when those perspectives are delivered by subordinates having emotional breakdowns. Especially then. The people below us in the hierarchy often see our impact more clearly than we do. They're the ones living with the consequences of our decisions, feeling the effects of our leadership style. If they can't tell us when we're failing, how can we ever improve? Daniel found himself studying her face, looking for signs that this was calculated corporate speak, designed to manipulate him into compliance. But her expression was open earnest, lacking the careful polish he'd learned to associate with her public pronouncements. You said on Saturday night that you wanted to revisit my proposal. Are you serious about that? Completely serious. But I want to approach it differently this time. Not as CEO reviewing subordinates' work, but as partners developing something together. I've been thinking about what that might look like. She reached for a folder on her desk, but instead of the thick reports and formal presentations he expected, she pulled out several sheets of handwritten notes. Her usually precise penmanship was loose, informal, the writing of someone thinking through problems rather than presenting polished solutions. I spent Sunday morning going through your original proposal again, she said. Not looking for flaws this time, but trying to understand the vision underneath the budget projections and timeline estimates. You were right, Daniel. About the core concept, about the need to think beyond quarterly returns, about our responsibility to consider long-term impact. But Daniel sensed there was more coming. But the implementation strategy needs work. The scope is too broad, the timeline too ambitious, the cost structure unsustainable for a company our size. Not because the ideas are wrong, but because they try to solve everything at once. Daniel leaned forward, his interest sharpening. This was the kind of constructive criticism he'd hoped for on Friday, specific, actionable, focused on improvement rather than destruction. What would you suggest? Pilot programs. Small-scale tests that let us prove concepts and refine approaches before committing massive resources. Start with 1 or 2 initiatives that can demonstrate clear value, then use those successes to build support for larger changes. That makes sense. Which initiatives would you prioritize? That's where I need your expertise. You understand the technical aspects better than I do, and you have a better sense of which changes would have the most immediate impact on employee morale and public perception. Daniel felt a spark of excitement, the first genuine enthusiasm he'd experienced about work in months. This was what he'd hoped for when he'd originally developed his proposal. Real collaboration with someone who had the power to make things happen. I think the energy efficiency upgrades would be the logical starting point, he said. LED lighting conversion, HVAC optimization, maybe solar panels for the parking garage. The upfront costs are manageable, the payback period is well documented, and the savings would be visible in our utility bills within 6 months. Concrete, measurable results. Cassandra nodded. I like it. What else? The employee engagement piece is harder to quantify, but potentially more important. Sustainability initiatives only work if people buy into them emotionally, not just intellectually. We'd need to create opportunities for staff to contribute ideas, to feel ownership in the process. How would that work practically? Green teams, maybe. Voluntary groups that meet monthly to brainstorm improvements and implement small-scale changes. Give them modest budgets and real authority to make decisions. Let them feel like partners in the transformation, rather than just employees following orders. Cassandra made notes as he spoke, her questions sharp and practical, but supportive rather than adversarial. This was what collaboration felt like, Daniel realized. Not the careful dance of superior and subordinate, but the messy, energetic process of 2 minds working toward shared goals. I want to bring other voices into this conversation, she said after they'd outlined several potential pilot programs. Maria Santos from Operations has been pushing for efficiency improvements for years. Tom Wilson knows our physical infrastructure better than anyone. And I think we should include some of the younger employees, people who'll be living with these systems for decades to come. You're talking about a real team, not just the two of us working in isolation. I'm talking about doing this right, which means acknowledging that neither of us has all the answers, that good ideas can come from anywhere in the organization. Daniel sat back in his chair, processing the implications. This was more than he dared hope for, not just a second chance for his proposal, but a fundamental shift in how decisions were made, how collaboration was structured, how power was distributed within the company. There's one more thing we need to address, Cassandra said, her tone becoming more serious. The optics of our collaboration. People are going to notice that I went from rejecting your proposal to working with you as a partner. There will be speculation, rumors, questions about favoritism or ulterior motives. What do you suggest? Transparency. We acknowledge that Friday's meeting didn't go well, that we both learned from the experience, and that we're committed to finding better ways to evaluate and develop new initiatives. We model the kind of professional growth and collaboration we want to see throughout the organization. And if people ask specifically what changed, we tell them the truth. That sometimes it takes stepping outside our professional roles to remember our shared humanity. That sometimes the best solutions come from unlikely partnerships. Daniel found himself smiling at the elegant simplicity of it. Truth as strategy, vulnerability as strength, human connection as the foundation for professional excellence. It was radical in its ordinariness, revolutionary in its basic decency. When do we start? He asked. Today. This afternoon, if you're available. I want to schedule a meeting with Maria and Tom, get their initial thoughts on the pilot program concepts. And I want to draft a company-wide memo about our new approach to innovation and collaboration. A memo announcing that we're going to start treating each other like human beings. A memo announcing that we're going to start prioritizing long-term value over short-term gains, that we're committed to sustainable practices, and that we believe the best ideas come from inclusive collaboration rather than top-down mandates. That's going to ruffle some feathers. Not everyone is going to be comfortable with that level of change. Cassandra's smile was sharp, carrying echoes of the corporate warrior he'd first encountered. Then they'll have to adapt or find somewhere else to work. I'm done apologizing for trying to build something better. The meeting ended with a handshake, firm, professional, but carrying undercurrents of the personal connection they'd forged. As Daniel walked back to his desk, he found himself moving differently, standing straighter, feeling purpose in his steps that had been absent for months. How did it go? Sarah Rodriguez intercepted him again, her curiosity undimmed by time. Better than expected, Daniel said truthfully. Much better. The afternoon meeting with Maria Santos and Tom Wilson exceeded even Daniel's optimistic expectations. Both veterans had been pushing for various improvements for years, only to see their suggestions disappear into bureaucratic black holes or be dismissed as too expensive or complicated. The opportunity to actually collaborate on solutions, to have their expertise valued and their input incorporated into real decision-making, energized them in ways Daniel hadn't seen since their early days with the company. This is what I've been waiting for, Maria said as they outlined the pilot program structure. The chance to actually fix problems instead of just documenting them. The energy efficiency stuff alone could save us 6 figures annually, Tom added. I've been maintaining systems that should have been upgraded years ago. Finally getting resources to do it right, instead of just keeping things limping along. It's like Christmas morning. But it was the human element that surprised Daniel most. As the meeting progressed, as ideas flew and plans took shape, the 3 colleagues found themselves talking not just about technical specifications and budget allocations, but about the kind of workplace they wanted to create, the legacy they wanted to leave, the difference they could make in their small corner of the world. "My daughter's going to start looking at colleges in a few years," Maria said during a discussion about long-term impacts. "I want to be able to tell her that I spent my career building something sustainable, something that made the world a little bit better." "My son's the same age," Daniel said. "These changes we're talking about, they're not just about corporate responsibility or good public relations. They're about creating a future our kids can be proud of." Cassandra, who had been mostly listening and taking notes, looked up from her legal pad. "Alex asked me last night what my job actually accomplishes," she said. "Not what my title is or how much money the company makes, but what we actually do that matters. I want to have a better answer for him." The conversation that followed was unlike anything Daniel had experienced in a corporate environment. Raw, honest, personal, a group of professionals acknowledging that their work had meaning beyond paychecks and performance reviews, that they had the power to create positive change if they were willing to try. By 5 o'clock, they had outlined 6 pilot programs, established timelines and budgets, and identified additional team members to recruit. More importantly, they had created something that felt like genuine partnership, a collaborative relationship, built on mutual respect and shared values rather than hierarchy and competition. "This has been one of the most productive meetings I've attended in years," Tom said, as they packed up their materials. "When do we meet again?" "Friday morning," Cassandra said. "Same time, same energy. And I want each of you to think about which other employees might be interested in joining our green teams. We need diverse perspectives if we're going to do this right." As the others filed out, Daniel lingered ostensibly to organize his notes, but really to process what had just happened. The transformation from Friday's humiliation to Monday's collaboration felt almost too good to be true, like a professional fairy tale that would dissolve under scrutiny. "You're wondering if this is sustainable," Cassandra observed, correctly reading his expression. "If the partnership we forged Saturday night can survive in the corporate environment." The thought had occurred to me. "I've been wondering the same thing. It's easier to be collaborative and vulnerable when you're sitting in a blanket fort with children. Much harder when you're dealing with board pressure and shareholder expectations and the daily grind of organizational politics. But I keep thinking about what Alex said, that being brave means doing what you have to do even when you're scared. Building something better is going to require sustained courage, not just momentary inspiration." Daniel nodded, understanding the challenge they faced. Change was easy to talk about, much harder to implement, when it required daily choices to prioritize long-term value over short-term comfort. "We'll figure it out as we go," he said, "like everything else worth doing." "Speaking of figuring things out," Cassandra said, her tone becoming slightly more personal, "Alex has been asking all day when he can see Emma again. Apparently, they have plans for improved fort architecture that require immediate implementation. Emma's been asking the same thing. I think she's convinced that Alex is the only person who truly understands her engineering vision. Would this weekend work Saturday afternoon? Maybe Alex could come to your place, or Emma could come to ours, whatever's easier." The casualness of the suggestion, the easy assumption that their children's friendship would continue despite the complexity of their own relationship, felt like another small miracle. 6 days ago, Daniel couldn't have imagined Cassandra Blake knowing his daughter's name. Now they were arranging play dates like any other parents navigating the social architecture of childhood. "Our place is fine," Daniel said. "Emma's already started stockpiling materials for Fort Awesome version 2.0. Fair warning, Alex has been researching structural engineering principles online. I think he's planning to introduce concepts like cantilevers and load-bearing walls to your living room. Should I be worried? only if you're attached to the current arrangement of your furniture." They shared a laugh, and Daniel marveled again at how natural this felt, planning their children's weekend while transitioning seamlessly between professional collaboration and personal connection. It was the kind of integration he'd never thought possible, the blending of different aspects of life that made everything feel more coherent, more meaningful. "Cassandra," he said as she gathered her things to leave, "thank you for today, for giving us a real chance to build something together. It means more than you know. Thank you for not giving up on the possibility that people can change, for believing that yesterday's enemies can become tomorrow's partners. Is that what we are now? Partners?" "I hope so. I think so. Ask me again in 6 months when we're in the middle of implementation challenges and budget fights and all the things that test good intentions." "I will," Daniel promised, "and I think we'll have a good answer." As he drove home that evening, Daniel found himself replaying the day's conversations, marveling at the distance traveled from Friday's devastation to Monday's hope. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Changing organizational culture never was. There would be setbacks, resistance moments when the path forward seemed unclear. But for the first time in years, he felt like he was working towards something that mattered, something that justified the hours away from Emma and the energy invested in professional life. The house felt different when he walked through the door, charged with possibility, in ways that had nothing to do with weekend adventures and everything to do with sustainable hope. Emma met him in the hallway, backpack still slung over her shoulder, face bright with post-school excitement. "How was work, Daddy? Did you and Alex's mom figure out how to save the world?" "We made a good start," Daniel said, lifting her into a hug that felt like coming home to everything that mattered most. "We made a very good start." The transformation didn't happen overnight, but it began with small, almost imperceptible shifts that rippled through Meridian Industries like stones thrown into still water. By Wednesday, word had spread about the sustainability pilot programs, and Daniel found his desk surrounded by colleagues who had previously shown little interest in his work. Some came with genuine enthusiasm, others with skepticism disguised as curiosity, but all seemed to sense that something fundamental was changing in the company's approach to innovation. "Is it true that Blake is actually listening to ideas from regular employees now?" Jennifer Walsh from accounting asked during his lunch break, her voice carrying the cautious hope of someone who had submitted suggestions into corporate black holes for years. "She's listening," Daniel confirmed. "More than that, she's actively seeking input. We're forming cross-departmental teams to tackle different aspects of the sustainability initiative. Cross-departmental teams with actual authority to implement changes, real authority, real budgets, real timelines." Jennifer's expression shifted from skepticism to something approaching excitement. "I've had ideas about waste reduction in our supply chain for 3 years. Numbers that would make your head spin in terms of potential savings." "Write them up," Daniel said. "Send them to me by Friday. We're looking for exactly that kind of operational insight." Similar conversations played out throughout the week as employees who had grown accustomed to hierarchical indifference discovered that their expertise was not only wanted, but essential. Maria Santos found herself fielding calls from departments she rarely interacted with, all eager to contribute to efficiency improvements they'd been advocating for years. Tom Wilson's calendar filled with meetings, as people realized that infrastructure upgrades meant more than just fixing broken equipment. They meant reimagining how work could be done better. But it was the resistance that truly tested the partnership Daniel and Cassandra had forged. Not everyone welcomed the collaborative approach or the emphasis on long-term thinking over quarterly performance. Marcus Chen, the CFO who had sat silent during Daniel's original humiliation, scheduled a private meeting with Cassandra on Thursday morning, emerging from her office with the tight-lipped expression of someone whose concerns had been heard but not accommodated. Hayes. He intercepted Daniel in the hallway afterward, his voice carrying the subtle threat of corporate politics. I hope you understand the position you're putting the company in with these environmental initiatives. Shareholders don't typically reward executives who prioritize feel-good projects over profit margins. I'm not sure I see the conflict, Daniel replied carefully. The pilot programs we're proposing show clear paths to cost savings and operational efficiency. That should appeal to any shareholder focused on long-term value. Long-term value is a luxury for companies with short-term stability. We're not in a position to take risks on unproven technologies and theoretical savings. What risks specifically concern you? Marcus's smile was thin and calculated. Budget overruns, implementation delays, employee distraction from core responsibilities, the kind of complications that tend to reflect poorly on the leadership team when quarterly reports come due. The warning was clear, couched in corporate speak, but unmistakably pointed. Marcus was positioning himself as the voice of fiscal responsibility, setting up narratives that could be deployed if the sustainability initiatives encountered any setbacks. It was classic organizational maneuvering, the kind of preemptive blame assignment that Daniel had witnessed, but never been important enough to experience directly. I appreciate your concerns, Daniel said, maintaining professional neutrality while mentally noting every word for later discussion with Cassandra. We'll make sure to document everything carefully and maintain clear accountability throughout the implementation process. I'm sure you will, Marcus replied, but his tone suggested he expected that documentation to become evidence in future corporate autopsies. Daniel found himself thinking about that conversation as he prepared for Alex's Saturday afternoon visit. The parallel struck him as both amusing and sobering. Just as he was learning to navigate 8-year-old social dynamics through Emma's friendship with Alex, he was also being forced to understand the equally complex but far more dangerous social structures of executive-level corporate relationships. Daddy, do you think Alex will like the improvements I made to the fort blueprints? Emma asked, spreading her meticulously drawn diagrams across the kitchen table. Over the past week, her architectural plans had evolved to include detailed specifications for ventilation systems, emergency exits, and what she termed snack distribution networks. I think Alex will be incredibly impressed, Daniel assured her. You've put a lot of thought into the engineering challenges. I researched load distribution online just like Alex did. Did you know that triangles are the strongest shape for building things? That's why bridges use triangular supports. I did not know that. You've been doing some serious scientific investigation. It's important to be prepared when you're working with a partner, Emma said solemnly. You can't just make stuff up and hope it works. The unconscious wisdom of her statement hit Daniel with unexpected force. She was right. Of course, partnerships required preparation, mutual respect for each other's expertise, shared commitment to achieving something better than either could accomplish alone. The same principles that guided successful 8-year-old fort construction applied to corporate collaboration, to professional relationships, to the delicate work of transforming organizational culture. When Cassandra's car pulled into the driveway at 2 o'clock, Emma was waiting by the window with the focused intensity of a project manager expecting critical stakeholders. Alex emerged from the passenger seat carrying what appeared to be a small toolbox, his serious expression suggesting he took his engineering responsibilities as seriously as Emma took her design obligations. He brought tools, Emma reported to Daniel, with obvious approval. This is going to be the most professional fort construction in history. Daniel opened the door to find both Cassandra and Alex looking more relaxed than he'd ever seen them. Cassandra wore jeans and a simple sweater instead of her usual corporate armor, and Alex had traded his typical serious demeanor for barely contained excitement about the afternoon's architectural challenges. "I hope you don't mind," Cassandra said, gesturing toward Alex's toolbox. He spent an hour this morning selecting the appropriate equipment for advanced fort construction. We may have underestimated the scope of today's project. "The tools are perfect," Daniel assured them. "Emma's been researching structural engineering principles all week. I think you're both taking this more seriously than some actual construction projects. When you're building something important, you do it right," Alex said, with the gravity of a master craftsman, earning an enthusiastic nod from Emma. "Exactly," she agreed. "Come on, Alex, I want to show you the improvements I made to our design." And the children disappeared down the hallway, already deep in technical discussion about optimal angles and material distribution. Daniel and Cassandra found themselves alone in the living room, surrounded by the comfortable domesticity of a Saturday afternoon and the lingering evidence of the week's professional collaboration. "How are things progressing at work?" Cassandra asked, settling onto the couch, with the ease of someone who no longer felt the need to maintain formal boundaries. "I've been hearing positive feedback about the team meetings, but I'm curious about your perspective on the implementation challenges." "Better than I expected in some ways, more complicated in others," Daniel said honestly. "The enthusiasm from employees has been incredible. People are coming out of the woodwork with ideas and expertise I never knew existed. But not everyone is thrilled with the collaborative approach," Cassandra finished. "Marcus had some pointed concerns about fiscal responsibility and shareholder expectations. You heard about that conversation." "Marcus scheduled a follow-up meeting with me yesterday. He's worried that we're prioritizing employee engagement over financial performance, that the board will view sustainability initiatives as expensive distractions from core business objectives." Daniel studied her face, looking for signs of doubt or reconsideration. The pressures Cassandra faced were real and immediate quarterly reports that could make or break stock prices, board members who measured success in narrow financial terms, the constant balancing act between innovation and proven performance metrics. "Are you having second thoughts," he asked directly, "about the sustainability initiatives number? About the collaborative approach to developing them? Absolutely not." Her voice carried the same steel he'd heard in corporate meetings, but now it was deployed in defense of partnership rather than hierarchy. "But I am concerned about political management. Marcus isn't wrong about the risks any major initiative carries, the potential for setbacks, and setbacks can be weaponized by people who oppose change. What do you suggest? Documentation, transparency, and results. We make sure every decision is well-researched and clearly justified. We involve stakeholders in the development process so they feel ownership rather than opposition. And we deliver measurable outcomes that speak louder than any political criticism." From down the hallway came the sound of furniture being moved and children engaged in animated technical discussion. Emma's voice carried clearly. "If we reinforce this joint with an additional support beam, we can extend the eastern corridor without compromising structural integrity." "They're definitely taking this seriously," Daniel observed. "Alex has been reading about architecture all week," Cassandra said with obvious pride. "He checked out 3 books from the library about bridge construction and spent an hour yesterday calculating weight distribution formulas. I haven't seen him this excited about anything in months." Emma's been the same way. She's approached this like a graduate-level engineering course. I think they bring out the best in each other, the collaborative energy, the shared commitment to excellence. It's remarkable how naturally they work together, how they've each elevated their individual efforts through partnership. The parallel to their own professional collaboration hung unspoken between them. But Daniel could see Cassandra making the same connections he was. Children. It seemed instinctively understood principles that adults had to consciously choose to embrace. That different perspectives strengthened rather than threatened good ideas, that shared ownership produced better outcomes than individual brilliance, that the joy of creation was multiplied when experienced together. "Can we come show you something?" Emma's voice called from down the hallway. "Of course," Daniel and Cassandra called back simultaneously, then looked at each other and laughed. The children appeared in the living room, leading what could only be described as a guided tour. Emma held detailed diagrams while Alex carried a tablet displaying what appeared to be computer-generated structural analysis. "We've completed the preliminary design phase," Alex announced with professional seriousness. "The new fort incorporates advanced engineering principles while maintaining the aesthetic and functional elements that made the original so successful. We used computer modeling to test different configurations," Emma added, showing them Alex's tablet screen. "This software lets you see how weight distributes through different structural elements." Daniel peered at the screen, which displayed a surprisingly sophisticated diagram of their proposed blanket fort, complete with stress analysis and load calculations. "Where did you find engineering software?" "Alex downloaded it," Emma said proudly. "He knows about all kinds of educational programs. This one's designed for teaching kids about architecture and engineering. It's the same principles they use for real buildings," Alex explained, "just simplified for our materials and scale. But the physics are identical." Cassandra leaned forward to examine the diagrams more closely, her expression shifting to something approaching awe. "This is incredibly sophisticated work. You've essentially created a complete project proposal with technical specifications and performance projections. Just like you and Daddy did for the sustainability thing," Emma said brightly. "We figured if grown-ups need good planning for important projects, kids probably do too." The insight hit Daniel with unexpected force. These 8-year-olds had intuitively replicated the collaborative process he and Cassandra had developed for their corporate initiative: research, planning, technical analysis, shared decision-making, and clear documentation of their reasoning. They'd approached their fort construction with the same seriousness and methodical preparation that characterized the best professional partnerships. "Should we begin construction?" Alex asked, consulting what appeared to be a project timeline. "According to our schedule, we have 4 hours for implementation and testing before dinner." "You made a schedule?" Daniel asked, increasingly impressed by their thoroughness. "Planning prevents problems," Emma said solemnly, clearly repeating something she'd learned somewhere. "Right, Alex. Right. And we want this to be the best fort ever built, so we need to follow proper project management procedures." For the next 2 hours, Daniel and Cassandra found themselves serving as consultants on what was undoubtedly the most professionally executed blanket fort in residential history. The children approached each phase of construction with careful attention to their predetermined specifications, testing structural elements before committing to final placement, making adjustments based on real-time performance data. "The northwestern support beam needs additional reinforcement," Alex observed during the midpoint assessment. "The load distribution is slightly uneven." "I see it," Emma agreed, consulting her diagrams. "If we add a secondary support here and redistribute the weight across these 3 points, it should stabilize the entire structure." They worked with the focused intensity of professional contractors, each contributing their specialized expertise while maintaining constant communication about shared objectives. Daniel found himself marveling at their natural collaboration, their ability to disagree about technical details without taking those disagreements personally, their shared commitment to achieving something excellent rather than just adequate. "This is extraordinary," Cassandra said quietly, standing beside him as they watched the children implement their structural modifications. "The way they communicate, the respect they show for each other's expertise, the shared ownership of the outcome, it's exactly what we're trying to achieve with the corporate teams. They make it look easy, Daniel observed. No ego, no territorial disputes, no hidden agendas. Just two people working together to build something better than either could create alone. Maybe that's the secret. Maybe collaboration is natural, and we've just trained ourselves out of it with years of competition and hierarchy and fear of vulnerability. You think adults can learn to work together like that again? I think we're learning, Cassandra said, her voice carrying quiet conviction. The meetings this week, the energy around the sustainability initiatives, the way people are opening up about ideas they've been sitting on for years, it feels like we're rediscovering something we forgot we knew how to do. Their conversation was interrupted by triumphant cheering from down the hallway. Emma and Alex had apparently completed their construction and were ready for the official inspection and approval process. Ladies and gentlemen, Emma announced as they entered her room, we present Fort Awesome 2.0 Advanced Engineering Edition. The structure before them was genuinely impressive. What had been a simple blanket arrangement the previous Saturday had been transformed into a complex architectural achievement with multiple chambers, engineered ventilation systems, and what appeared to be a functioning pulley system for efficient snack delivery. This is remarkable, Daniel said, genuinely awed by their achievement. You've created something that belongs in a children's engineering museum. The structural integrity is significantly improved over the original design, Alex explained clearly, proud but maintaining his scientific objectivity. We've eliminated all the weak points and added redundant support systems. And it's bigger, Emma added excitedly. We have separate rooms for different activities, reading, planning, snack storage, and emergency meetings. Emergency meetings, Cassandra asked. For when we need to solve problems or make important decisions, Alex said seriously. Every good partnership needs a secure space for confidential discussions. Again, Daniel felt that jolt of recognition at the unconscious wisdom embedded in their play. These children had created not just a physical structure, but a framework for ongoing collaboration, designated spaces for different types of interaction systems, for resource-sharing protocols for decision-making. Should we test the structural integrity? Emma asked, clearly eager to demonstrate their engineering success. Absolutely, Cassandra said. Though I have to warn you, if this thing collapses while we're inside it, we're all going to have some explaining to do. It won't collapse, Alex said with quiet confidence. We've tested every component. The math is solid. And indeed, the fort proved remarkably stable as all four of them crawled inside for the official inaugural ceremony. The interior was spacious and well lit, with thoughtfully placed flashlights, and even a small battery-powered fan for air circulation. This is incredible, Cassandra said, settling into the reading nook Emma and Alex had created. I feel like I'm inside a piece of functional art. It's better than some conference rooms I've been in, Daniel added, earning giggles from both children. That's because we designed it for collaboration, Emma explained. Everything is arranged so people can see each other and share ideas easily. Unlike grown-up meeting rooms where people sit in rows facing one direction, Alex added with surprising insight into corporate architecture. They spent the better part of an hour in Fort Awesome 2.0 playing games and telling stories and engaging in the kind of relaxed, unpressured conversation that seemed impossible anywhere else. The children taught the adults card games they'd learned at school. The adults shared stories about their own childhood fort-building adventures. Gradually, the boundaries between parent and child, between boss and employee, between formal and informal interaction, dissolved into something more fundamental, human beings enjoying each other's company without agenda or performance pressure. I could stay here forever. Emma sighed contentedly, leaning against her father's shoulder. Me too. Alex agreed, curled up next to his mother, in a way that reminded Daniel how rare these moments of pure relaxation probably were for both of them. "Unfortunately," Cassandra said, with obvious reluctance, "the outside world is going to expect us back eventually." "Does it have to?" Emma asked with the plaintive hope of someone who had discovered paradise and didn't want to leave. "Afraid so, Princess. But the fort will be here whenever you want to visit. And Alex can come back to use it too. Of course. This is a collaborative creation. Both architects should have full access to their achievement." As they reluctantly emerged from the fort and began the process of returning to Saturday evening routines, Daniel found himself reflecting on the afternoon's unexpected lessons. Watching his daughter and Alex work together had reinforced his conviction that the collaborative approach he and Cassandra were implementing at work wasn't just professionally sound, it was fundamentally more human, more sustainable, more likely to produce outcomes that people could take pride in. "Thank you," Cassandra said, as she and Alex prepared to leave, "for hosting this, for sharing Emma's expertise, for letting our kids teach us something about partnership. Thank you for raising someone who brings out the best in my daughter. Alex is an incredible kid, and watching them work together has been one of the highlights of my week." "Can we do this again soon?" Alex asked hopefully. "We have ideas for Fort Awesome 3.0 that incorporate some advanced concepts we found in the engineering software." "Absolutely," Daniel said, "though I'm slightly afraid to ask what advanced concepts means in this context." "Load-bearing walls and cantilevers," Emma said proudly. "We're going to build something that defies gravity, within safe parameters," Alex added quickly, clearly anticipating parental concerns about structural ambition. As they drove away, Daniel and Emma stood in the doorway waving goodbye, both of them already planning the next phase of their architectural adventure. But Daniel found himself thinking less about future fort construction and more about the broader implications of what he'd witnessed. The following Monday brought news that would test every principle they'd established about collaboration and trust. Daniel arrived at work to find an email from Marcus Chen requesting a meeting to discuss fiscal concerns regarding the Sustainability Initiative budget allocations. The tone was professionally neutral, but Daniel had learned enough about corporate communication to recognize a challenge when he saw one. The meeting took place in Marcus's office, a space that felt deliberately intimidating, with its minimalist decor and carefully positioned furniture designed to emphasize hierarchy. Marcus had apparently invited Sarah Rodriguez from marketing and James Patterson from legal, a combination that suggested this was more than a routine budget review. "Daniel," Marcus began without preamble, "we've been reviewing the preliminary cost projections for the pilot programs, and frankly, we have concerns about the financial viability of the proposed timeline." "What specific concerns?" Daniel asked, settling into the chair across from Marcus's desk, and noting how the others had positioned themselves to create a subtle but unmistakable sense of interrogation. "The LED conversion project alone is projected to cost $180,000 in upfront investments," Sarah said, consulting a tablet. "That's a significant expense for a pilot program with uncertain returns." "The ROI analysis shows payback within 18 months, Daniel responded. "The utility savings over 5 years would exceed $400,000, not including the operational efficiency improvements and environmental benefits." "Assuming the technology performs as advertised," James interjected. "Assuming no installation complications or unforeseen maintenance costs. Assuming energy prices remain stable over the projection period." Daniel could see where this was heading, a systematic dismantling of the proposal through worst-case scenario analysis and risk amplification. It was a classic corporate technique for killing initiatives that made people uncomfortable, regardless of their actual merit. Every project involves some degree of uncertainty, he said carefully. But the LED technology we're proposing has been proven in thousands of commercial installations. The risk profile is actually quite conservative. Conservative? Marcus's eyebrows rose. Daniel, with respect, you're not in a position to evaluate financial risk at this level. These decisions affect shareholder value, board confidence, quarterly reporting. The margin for error is essentially zero. The condescension in his voice was unmistakable, and Daniel felt the familiar heat of professional humiliation rising in his chest. But this time, instead of accepting the diminishment, he found himself remembering Emma and Alex's approach to collaboration. Respectful, but confident, prepared, but not defensive, committed to excellence, but willing to explain their reasoning. You're right that I'm not a financial expert, he said evenly. That's why we've structured this as a collaborative process involving multiple departments and expertise areas. Tom Wilson's infrastructure knowledge, Maria Santos's operational experience, and your own financial analysis are all essential components of good decision-making. But ultimately, James said, someone has to take responsibility for outcomes. Someone has to sign off on expenditures and answer to stakeholders when results don't meet projections. Agreed. And that someone is Cassandra, working with input from all of us, just like any other major corporate initiative. Is it though? Marcus leaned forward, his expression sharpening. Or is this different because of your personal relationship with Ms. Blake? The question hung in the air like smoke, dangerous and difficult to dispel. Daniel could see the trap being laid. Any defense of his collaboration with Cassandra could be interpreted as confirmation of inappropriate personal influence, while failure to defend it might suggest the professional partnership lacked legitimacy. My relationship with Ms. Blake is professional, he said carefully. We're working together because we share a commitment to sustainable business practices and collaborative decision-making. The same way she works with any other employee who brings valuable expertise to important projects. Of course, Marcus said, but his tone suggested he found the explanation inadequate. It's just interesting that after years of conventional management approaches, she's suddenly embracing radical collaboration with someone whose proposal she rejected just 2 weeks ago. People change. Organizations evolve. New approaches become necessary when old methods stop producing optimal results, or when personal feelings cloud professional judgment. The accusation was subtle but unmistakable, and Daniel felt a surge of anger that surprised him with its intensity, not just at the implied criticism of his own motives, but at the suggestion that Cassandra's leadership decisions were somehow compromised by emotion or personal preference. I think Ms. Blake's track record speaks for itself, he said, his voice carrying more edge than he'd intended. Her decisions are consistently focused on long-term value creation and organizational success. If she's chosen to explore collaborative approaches to sustainability initiatives, it's because she believes those approaches will produce better outcomes for the company. Better outcomes or better relationships? Sarah asked, and there was something almost triumphant in her expression, as if she'd been waiting for an opportunity to voice doubts that had been circulating in certain circles. Before Daniel could respond, a knock on Marcus's office door interrupted the increasingly tense conversation. Marcus's assistant peered in with an apologetic expression. I'm sorry to interrupt, but Ms. Blake would like to see everyone in conference room A immediately. She said it was urgent. The 5-minute walk to the conference room felt like a march to judgment, though. Daniel wasn't sure whose judgment or on what charges. He found himself wondering if Cassandra had somehow learned about the meeting, if this was her response to attempted political undermining, or if something else entirely had prompted the urgent summons. Conference Room A was the largest meeting space on the executive floor, typically reserved for board meetings and major announcements. When they arrived, Daniel was surprised to find it nearly full department heads, senior managers, and several employees he recognized from the various pilot program discussions. Cassandra stood at the head of the room, but instead of her usual position behind the lectern, she'd moved to the side, creating a more collaborative physical arrangement. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," she began, her voice carrying the authority he'd grown accustomed to, but without the distancing formality that typically characterized her large group communications. "I wanted to share some developments regarding our sustainability initiatives and address some questions that have been raised about our collaborative approach to organizational change." Daniel felt his stomach clench. Had Marcus or one of the others gone to her with their concerns? Was this going to become a public referendum on his competence and their partnership? "Over the past week," Cassandra continued, "we've received incredible response to our pilot program proposals. Employees from every department have contributed ideas, expertise, and enthusiasm that frankly exceeded my expectations. What's become clear is that we have significantly more innovation capacity within this organization than our traditional top-down approach allowed us to access." She gestured toward a presentation screen that showed a detailed breakdown of proposed initiatives, cost-benefit analyses, and implementation timelines, but instead of the usual sterile corporate graphics. The presentation included photos of employees engaged in collaborative planning sessions and quotes from team members about their contributions to the process. "The pilot programs we're launching represent more than environmental sustainability," she continued. "They represent a fundamental shift toward organizational sustainability, the recognition that our greatest competitive advantage lies not in maintaining rigid hierarchies, but in unleashing the collective intelligence and creativity of our entire workforce." Daniel glanced around the room, noting the mixture of expressions on his colleagues' faces. Some showed genuine engagement and enthusiasm. Others displayed the careful neutrality of people waiting to see which way the political winds would blow before committing to any position. "I want to address directly some concerns that have been raised about fiscal responsibility and risk management," Cassandra said, and Daniel realized she was indeed aware of the broader skepticism surrounding their initiatives. "Every proposal we're considering has been subjected to rigorous financial analysis. Every timeline has been developed with input from the operational experts who will be responsible for implementation. We're not pursuing feel-good environmentalism at the expense of business fundamentals. We're pursuing smart business practices that happen to align with environmental responsibility." She clicked to a new slide showing detailed financial projections for each pilot program, numbers that Daniel recognized as more comprehensive than anything he'd seen in previous presentations. Someone had clearly invested significant time in addressing every possible fiscal concern with hard data and conservative assumptions. "The LED conversion project, for example, requires an upfront investment of $180,000, she continued, and Daniel felt Marcus shift uncomfortably beside him. "But the payback period is 14 months, not 18. The 5-year return on investment exceeds 300%, not including the operational benefits of reduced maintenance costs and improved lighting quality. Most importantly, this isn't experimental technology. We're implementing proven solutions that hundreds of similar companies have already adopted successfully." The presentation continued with similar detail for each proposed initiative, methodically addressing every concern Daniel had heard raised about timeline cost and implementation complexity. But more than just financial justification, Cassandra was making a broader argument about the value of collaborative decision-making itself. The traditional approach to organizational change involves executives making decisions in isolation, then expecting employees to implement those decisions with enthusiasm and expertise, she said. "But the people closest to our daily operations often have the best insights into what changes would be most effective and how to implement them successfully. By including those voices in the development process, We create both better solutions and stronger organizational buy-in. She paused, looking around the room with the kind of direct eye contact that made everyone feel individually addressed. This isn't about being nice or feeling good about our collaborative culture. This is about being smarter, more efficient, and more competitive. Companies that can harness collective intelligence will outperform companies that rely on individual brilliance every time. When she opened this floor for questions, the first hand that went up belonged to Jennifer Walsh from accounting, who had approached Daniel earlier in the week about supply chain improvements. Ms. Blake, I've been working on some analysis of our procurement processes that could complement the sustainability initiatives. Would there be an opportunity to present those ideas to the development teams? Absolutely. In fact, we're scheduling expanded team meetings next week specifically to incorporate additional expertise. I'd like you to coordinate with Daniel and Maria to ensure your analysis gets proper consideration. More hands went up, employees eager to contribute, specialized knowledge department heads asking about resource allocation managers, seeking clarification about how the collaborative approach would affect their traditional responsibilities. But notably absent were the confrontational questions Daniel had been expecting, the challenges to fundamental assumptions or demands for detailed justification of every decision. Marcus, who had been silent throughout the presentation, finally spoke up. Ms. Blake, can you help us understand how this collaborative approach will affect accountability structures? Who ultimately takes responsibility for outcomes when decisions are made by committee? It was a fair question, though. Daniel suspected the motivations behind it were less than purely procedural. Cassandra's response was immediate and decisive. Accountability remains exactly where it's always been with me. I take full responsibility for every decision we make, whether that decision emerges from collaborative input or individual analysis. The collaborative process improves the quality of our decision-making, but it doesn't diffuse responsibility for outcomes. And if the collaborative process produces recommendations that conflict with traditional business metrics or stakeholder expectations, then we'll address those conflicts based on comprehensive analysis of long-term value creation. Our responsibility to stakeholders includes the responsibility to position this company for sustainable success, not just short-term performance metrics. The implicit challenge in Marcus's question had been met and neutralized, but Daniel could see the CFO filing away information for future use. The resistance hadn't disappeared. It had simply been forced underground, where it might be more dangerous, but also less able to directly undermine the initiatives they were developing. As the meeting concluded and people began filing out, Daniel found himself simultaneously energized by the public support for their collaborative approach and concerned about the undercurrents of organizational politics that were clearly still in play. Change was never simple, especially in environments where power structures were deeply entrenched and personal stakes were high. Daniel, could you stay for a moment? Cassandra asked as the room emptied. When they were alone, she moved away from the formal presentation area to sit in one of the regular conference chairs, creating a more intimate conversational space. I assume you know about Marcus's concerns regarding our partnership, she said without preamble. I got a preview this morning, along with some rather pointed questions about the nature of our professional relationship. I see. And how did you handle those questions? Carefully, professionally, with the emphasis on our shared commitment to excellent outcomes rather than personal motivations. Cassandra nodded, though her expression remained serious. The political challenges are going to get more complex before they get simpler. Success breeds scrutiny, and collaborative leadership threatens people who've built their careers on traditional power structures. Are you having second thoughts? About the initiatives, never. About the collaborative approach, absolutely not. But I am thinking strategically about how to manage resistance and maintain momentum while we prove that this approach produces superior results. What do you need from me? Continued excellence, continued professionalism, continued focus on outcomes rather than politics. She paused, choosing her words carefully. And continued trust that we're building something worth the inevitable challenges. You have all of that, Daniel said without hesitation. Whatever political games people want to play, our work speaks for itself. The pilot programs are solid, the collaborative process is producing better solutions, and we're creating organizational change that will benefit everyone, even when that change threatens some people's traditional authority. Especially then. Change is uncomfortable, but that doesn't make it wrong. Cassandra smiled, and for a moment, Daniel saw echoes of the person who had sat in his blanket fort just a week ago, vulnerable and uncertain, but willing to trust in the possibility of connection. Alex has been asking when he can see Emma again, she said, shifting to safer conversational territory. Apparently, they have plans for additional architectural innovations that require immediate implementation. Emma's been asking the same thing. I think they've discovered something about partnership that we're all still learning, which is that the best things happen when you combine different strengths toward shared goals. That collaboration isn't just more effective than competition, it's more fun. Maybe that's what we need to remember when the politics get challenging. That we're not just trying to be more efficient or profitable, but more human. More connected to what makes work meaningful instead of just necessary. As Daniel walked back to his desk, he found himself thinking about the afternoon's events and their broader implications. The presentation had been successful in demonstrating the viability of their initiatives and the value of collaborative decision-making. But it had also revealed the fault lines that would define the battles ahead between traditional hierarchical control and distributed leadership, between short-term performance metrics and long-term value creation, between organizational change and entrenched resistance. The path forward wouldn't be simple or linear. There would be setbacks, political challenges, moments when the collaborative approach seemed harder than the traditional alternatives. But there would also be moments like the ones he'd shared with Emma and Alex, when the joy of building something together reminded everyone involved why the work mattered in the first place. And perhaps that was enough, the knowledge that change was possible, that people could choose collaboration over competition, that the future could be different from the past if enough individuals were willing to risk vulnerability for the possibility of connection. The transformation was happening. One conversation at a time, one partnership at a time, one blanket fort at a time. Not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. Not because it guaranteed success, but because it promised something more valuable, the chance to build something worth believing in. The next 6 weeks unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony, each movement building on the last, until the transformation at Meridian Industries became undeniable. The LED conversion project finished 2 weeks ahead of schedule and $15,000 under budget, with energy savings visible in the very first monthly utility report. The employee green teams had expanded from the original pilot group to include representatives from every department, their monthly meetings drawing standing room-only crowds of colleagues eager to contribute ideas and volunteer for implementation work. But it was the less quantifiable changes that truly marked the success of their collaborative approach. The hallway conversations were different now, less guarded, more enthusiastic, filled with the energy of people who believed their contributions mattered. Department meetings included agenda items about cross-functional cooperation that would have been unthinkable months earlier. The company suggestion box, long ignored as a corporate formality, overflowed with detailed proposals that employees took time to research and develop before submitting. Daniel found himself at the center of it all, not as a manager or supervisor, but as something entirely new, a collaboration coordinator who helped connect ideas with expertise, passion, with resources, vision, with practical implementation. His title hadn't changed, but his role had evolved into something that didn't exist on any traditional organizational chart. "Daddy, you seem different lately," Emma observed one Thursday evening as they worked together on her science project about renewable energy. "Happier, but also more, I don't know, important." "Important how?" Daniel asked, looking up from the solar panel diagram they were studying. "Like you're doing something that really matters. Like when you talk about work now, your eyes light up the way they do when we build forts or go on adventures." The insight hit him with unexpected force. She was right, work had become an adventure, a collaborative exploration of possibility rather than a series of tasks to be endured. The dread he'd felt every Monday morning for months had been replaced by genuine excitement about the challenges and opportunities each day might bring. "I think you're right, Princess. Work has become more like play, but the important kind of play, where you're building something real. Like when Alex and I work on fort designs. Exactly like that. Different materials, bigger scale, but the same spirit of partnership and creation." "Speaking of Alex," Emma said with studied casualness, "when is he coming over again? We have new ideas for Fort Awesome 3.0 that incorporate some advanced architectural principles we learned about online. This weekend, I think. Your mom..." He caught himself. "Alex's mom and I are both presenting to the board of directors Monday morning, so we might need some fort-building relaxation afterward." The board presentation had been Cassandra's idea, a culmination of their pilot program results, designed to secure approval and funding for company-wide implementation of the sustainability initiatives. 6 weeks of data employee feedback and operational improvements had been compiled into what Daniel knew was the most comprehensive proposal he'd ever been part of creating. But it was also the biggest test yet of their partnership. Board members were even more focused on traditional metrics than Marcus Chen had been, and the stakes were significantly higher. Success would mean resources and authority to transform how Meridian Industries approached not just environmental responsibility, but collaborative decision-making itself. Failure would mean returning to hierarchical systems that now felt not just inefficient, but fundamentally wrong. "Are you nervous about talking to the important business people?" Emma asked, demonstrating her uncanny ability to read his emotions. "A little," Daniel admitted, "but also excited. We have good work to show them and strong results to support our recommendations. And you'll have Alex's mom there to help, right? Like how Alex and I help each other with difficult building projects." "Right. We make a good team." "The best teams," Emma said, with the wisdom of an 8-year-old who had discovered the power of collaboration, "are the ones where everyone makes everyone else better." Friday afternoon brought unexpected news that would reshape their presentation strategy. Janet, Cassandra's assistant, called to inform Daniel that Marcus Chen had requested time during the board meeting to present what he termed alternative financial projections for the sustainability initiatives. The timing wasn't coincidental. Marcus was positioning himself to offer contrast and criticism, just as they were seeking approval for expanded implementation. Daniel found Cassandra in her office late that evening, surrounded by spreadsheets and presentation materials, her usually perfect composure showing signs of strain. She looked up as he knocked her expression, mixing frustration with determination. "I assume you heard about Marcus's board presentation," she said without preamble. Janet called. "Any idea what his alternative projections might include? Worst-case scenarios, conservative estimates of benefits, and probably some pointed questions about whether collaborative decision-making is compatible with fiscal responsibility. She gestured at the papers scattered across her desk. I've been trying to anticipate every possible challenge and prepare responses that address legitimate concerns without defending against bad faith criticism. How can I help? By being yourself. By presenting our work with the same passion and expertise you've brought to every aspect of this project. The results speak for themselves, Daniel. We just need to make sure the board understands what those results actually mean. Daniel settled into the chair across from her desk, noting how different this felt from their first meeting in this same space. Then he'd been a subordinate awaiting judgment from a superior. Now they were partners preparing for a shared challenge. What worries you most about Monday? He asked. That they'll reduce everything we've accomplished to a simple cost-benefit analysis that misses the point entirely. That they'll focus on quarterly returns instead of organizational transformation. That they'll see collaboration as a nice idea that's ultimately less reliable than traditional command and control management. And what excites you most? Cassandra paused, apparently surprised by the question. The possibility that we can prove something important. That we can demonstrate that treating people as partners rather than resources doesn't just feel better, it produces better outcomes. That trust and respect and shared ownership aren't weaknesses in a competitive business environment, but competitive advantages. Then that's what we present. Not just the numbers, though those are strong. Not just the process improvements, though those are significant. But the evidence that there's a better way to work, a more human way to create value. You make it sound simple. Maybe it is simple. Maybe we've been making it complicated by assuming that business success requires us to check our humanity at the door. Saturday brought the long-awaited architectural summit between Emma and Alex, their third collaboration, but their most ambitious yet. This time, Cassandra stayed for the entire afternoon, officially serving as a technical consultant, but actually just enjoying the opportunity to watch her son's creativity flourish in partnership with Emma's boundless enthusiasm. The cantilever design is working perfectly, Alex announced, as they completed the structural framework for what they dubbed Fort Awesome Maximum Engineering Edition. The load distribution allows us to extend this section without compromising the integrity of the main supports. And the pulley system for snack delivery is even better than we hoped, Emma added, demonstrating the mechanical advantage they'd achieved through careful rope and wheel placement. We can transport supplies to any section of the fort without leaving our operational posts. Daniel and Cassandra exchanged glances from their positions as supervisory consultants, both amazed by the sophistication of the children's achievement. What had started as simple blanket fort construction had evolved into a complex engineering project that incorporated principles of physics, architecture, and project management that many adults would struggle to implement. This is remarkable, Cassandra said, crawling through one of the access tunnels to examine the interior spaces. You've created multiple functional areas with efficient traffic flow and resource distribution. It's like a small city designed for optimal collaboration. That was the goal, Alex said seriously. Emma and I researched urban planning principles to make sure our design supported the activities we wanted to do together. Urban planning? Daniel asked, increasingly impressed by their thoroughness. Cities work best when they're designed for people to interact and share resources efficiently, Emma explained. So we applied those same ideas to fort construction. Different zones for different activities, but connected so you can move between them easily. And the whole structure is designed to be expandable, Alex added. We can add new sections or modify existing ones without having to rebuild everything from scratch. Adaptable architecture, Cassandra murmured, and Daniel could see her making connections between their children's approach and the organizational challenges they faced at work. Building systems that can evolve rather than structures that lock you into fixed configurations. They spent the afternoon exploring every aspect of Fort Awesome Maximum Engineering Edition, playing games that utilized its various specialized areas and testing the efficiency of its mechanical systems. But more than just enjoying the children's achievement, Daniel found himself studying their collaborative process with renewed appreciation for its sophistication. Emma and Alex didn't just work together. They worked together strategically. They identified their individual strengths and found ways to combine them that multiplied rather than simply added their individual contributions. They disagreed about technical details without taking those disagreements personally. They maintained shared ownership of their vision while dividing implementation responsibilities based on expertise and interest. "You know," Cassandra said as they prepared dinner together in the kitchen, while the children conducted final structural tests. "Watching them work together makes me more confident about Monday's presentation." "How so?" "Because they prove that collaboration isn't just theoretical. It's practical, efficient, and produces results that neither could achieve alone. If 2 8-year-olds can master these principles, surely a room full of business executives can understand their value. Unless those executives have spent so many years competing instead of collaborating that they've forgotten how it's supposed to work. Then we'll remind them. We'll show them what's possible when people choose partnership over politics, trust over control, shared success over individual achievement." Sunday evening found Daniel in the familiar position of helping Emma with homework while simultaneously reviewing presentation materials for the next day's board meeting. The parallel struck him as fitting. Both activities required patience, careful attention to detail, and the faith that preparation would lead to positive outcomes. "Daddy," Emma said, as she worked through math problems at the kitchen table, "are you nervous about your important meeting tomorrow?" "A little nervous, but mostly excited. Alex's mom and I have good work to show the decision makers, and we think they'll be impressed by what we've accomplished." "What happens if they don't like your ideas?" It was a fair question, one Daniel had been avoiding thinking about too directly. "Then we'll figure out other ways to keep building good things. Sometimes the first presentation doesn't work, but that doesn't mean you stop trying. Like when Alex and I had to redesign the Fort support system 3 times before we got it right. Exactly like that. The important thing is to keep working towards something better, even when it takes longer than you hoped." "Will you still be able to work with Alex's mom if the business people say no to your ideas?" Daniel paused in his review of sustainability metrics, struck by the complexity of his daughter's question. Would their professional partnership survive a significant setback? Would the collaborative culture they'd been building prove durable enough to withstand institutional resistance? "I hope so," he said honestly. "We've learned a lot about working together, and those lessons don't disappear just because one presentation doesn't go perfectly." "Good," Emma said with satisfaction. "Because Alex and I have plans for Fort Awesome 4.0 that are going to require continued parental consultation and snack procurement services." Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly weather that matched Daniel's mixture of anticipation and anxiety as he drove to the office. The board meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock, which gave him time to review notes and coordinate final details with Cassandra, but not enough time to overthink the dozens of ways the presentation might go wrong. The executive conference room had been transformed for the occasion, with presentation screens and comfortable seating arranged to facilitate discussion rather than simply receive information. Board members were already gathering when Daniel arrived, serious-looking individuals in expensive suits who carried themselves with the confidence of people accustomed to making decisions that affected hundreds of employees and millions of dollars. "Daniel," Cassandra greeted him with a smile that projected calm confidence, despite the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. Ready to show them what we've built. As ready as I'll ever be. How are you feeling? Like we're about to prove something important. Not just about sustainability initiatives, but about the power of collaborative leadership to produce superior outcomes. Marcus Chen entered the room precisely at 10 o'clock, carrying a folder that Daniel assumed contained his alternative financial projections. His expression was professionally neutral, but there was something in his posture that suggested he viewed the morning's proceedings as a contest rather than a collaborative evaluation of ideas. "Ladies and gentlemen," Cassandra began once everyone was seated, "thank you for making time to review our sustainability pilot program results and consider recommendations for company-wide implementation. What we've accomplished over the past 6 weeks represents more than environmental responsibility. It represents a new approach to organizational decision-making that we believe will become a significant competitive advantage." And the presentation that followed was the most comprehensive and compelling Daniel had ever been part of creating. Cassandra led with big-picture vision and strategic context, then handed off to Daniel for detailed analysis of implementation results and employee engagement data. They moved seamlessly between high-level concepts and specific metrics, individual achievements, and collaborative processes, immediate returns, and long-term value creation. The LED conversion project finished 2 weeks ahead of schedule and significantly under budget. Daniel reported clicking through slides that showed not just financial results, but employee satisfaction surveys and operational efficiency improvements. But more importantly, the collaborative process we used to implement these changes has created organizational capacity that extends far beyond energy efficiency. He highlighted examples of cross-departmental cooperation that had emerged organically from the pilot program's employee innovations that had saved both time and money, and cultural shifts that had improved everything from customer service to employee retention. The sustainability initiatives had become a catalyst for broader organizational transformation that was showing benefits throughout the company. The green teams now include representatives from every department. Cassandra continued taking over to discuss the scalability of their collaborative approach. These employees have contributed more than 200 process improvement suggestions in 6 weeks, with implementation rates exceeding 80%. We're not just engaging people in environmental responsibility, we're unleashing innovation capacity that was previously untapped. The board members asked thoughtful questions about timeline, budget, and risk management, but their tone was generally supportive rather than skeptical. Daniel began to feel optimistic that their presentation was resonating, that the combination of strong results and compelling vision was making the case for expanded implementation. Then Marcus Chen asked for time to present his alternative analysis. "I want to commend Daniel and Cassandra for their enthusiasm and the preliminary results they've achieved." He began with professional courtesy that carried subtle undertones of condescension. "However, I think we need to examine these initiatives through a more rigorous financial lens before committing significant additional resources." His presentation focused relentlessly on worst-case scenarios and conservative projections, questioning assumptions about technology, reliability, implementation, complexity, and long-term employee engagement. While technically accurate, his analysis stripped away all context about organizational benefits and competitive advantages, reducing the sustainability initiatives to simple cost-benefit calculations that made them appear risky and expensive. The collaborative approach, while admirable in its intentions, introduces variables that are difficult to control and impossible to predict. Marcus continued, "Employee enthusiasm is inherently unstable. Cross-departmental coordination creates complexity that can slow decision-making and dilute accountability. From a risk management perspective, traditional hierarchical implementation would be more reliable and measurable. Daniel felt his stomach clench as Marcus systematically dismantled not just their specific proposals, but the entire philosophy of collaborative leadership they'd been developing. Every point was reasonable in isolation, but together they created a narrative that made partnership seem naive and dangerous compared to established command and control alternatives. Furthermore, Marcus concluded, the personal relationship between our CEO and the primary project coordinator raises questions about objectivity and professional judgment that could expose the company to criticism from shareholders and stakeholders. The room fell silent, the implications of his statement hanging in the air like smoke. Daniel felt heat rising in his chest, not just embarrassment at having his competence questioned, but anger at the suggestion that Cassandra's leadership was somehow compromised by their collaborative partnership. Before either he or Cassandra could respond, a voice from the back of the room spoke up. "Excuse me." It was Dr. Patricia Williams, the board member who served as CEO of a major environmental consulting firm. "Mr. Chen, could you clarify what you mean by personal relationship? Are you suggesting that professional collaboration between executives and employees is inherently problematic?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably, apparently not expecting his implication to be challenged so directly. "I'm simply noting that the unusually close working relationship between Ms. Blake and Mr. Hayes might affect objective evaluation of these initiatives." "Close working relationship," Dr. Williams repeated slowly. "You mean the kind of partnership that has produced ahead-of-schedule, under-budget implementation of multiple pilot programs with measurable positive impacts on both environmental performance and employee engagement?" "Well, yes, but—" "Mr. Chen," interrupted Robert Davidson, the board's longest-serving member. "In my 40 years of business experience, I've learned that successful initiatives usually involve exactly the kind of collaborative leadership that Ms. Blake and Mr. Hayes have demonstrated. The results speak for themselves." What followed was a discussion that exceeded Daniel's most optimistic expectations. Board members asked detailed questions about scalability and implementation, but their focus was on how to expand successful collaboration rather than whether to continue it. They wanted to understand the mechanisms that had produced such strong results, not debate whether those results were worth pursuing. "The employee engagement data is particularly impressive," noted Sarah Chen, the board member who oversaw human resources for a Fortune 500 company. "Retention rates, productivity metrics, innovation contributions. Every indicator suggests that collaborative approaches are producing superior outcomes across multiple dimensions. And the financial returns are solid," added David Rodriguez, whose background in private equity made him particularly focused on quantitative results. "Even using conservative projections, the ROI on these initiatives exceeds most capital investment alternatives we've considered." As the discussion continued, Daniel realized that Marcus's attempt to undermine their partnership had actually strengthened the board's confidence in their approach. By forcing explicit examination of collaboration versus hierarchy, personal relationship versus professional distance, the CFO had created an opportunity for board members to articulate their support for exactly the kind of leadership transformation Daniel and Cassandra were modeling. "I'd like to propose a motion," Dr. Williams said, as the formal discussion period concluded, "that we approve full implementation of the sustainability initiatives as presented with expansion of the collaborative development process to other major organizational decisions." "Seconded," said Robert Davidson immediately. The vote was unanimous, except for Marcus Chen's abstention, a result that left Daniel feeling simultaneously elated and slightly stunned. Not only had their specific proposals been approved, but the board had explicitly endorsed the collaborative approach that had made those proposals possible. "There's one more thing," Dr. Williams added as the meeting prepared to adjourn. "Ms. Blake, the board would like you to consider establishing a new executive position focused on organizational collaboration and innovation. Someone who could work across departments to identify opportunities for the kind of partnership-based problem-solving you've demonstrated here." Cassandra glanced at Daniel with an expression that mixed surprise with something that might have been hope. "That's an interesting idea. Do you have specific qualifications in mind for such a position? Someone with proven ability to build bridges between different expertise areas. Someone who understands both technical implementation and cultural change. Someone who has demonstrated that collaboration produces superior results even when it requires personal risk and professional vulnerability." The implication was clear, though Dr. Williams was careful not to make explicit recommendations about personnel decisions. Daniel felt his pulse quicken as he realized the magnitude of what was being suggested, not just approval of their initiatives, but recognition that their collaborative approach had value worthy of institutional support. "We'll certainly consider that recommendation carefully," Cassandra said diplomatically, though her expression suggested the consideration would be serious and immediate. As the board members filed out offering congratulations and expressing enthusiasm for implementation updates, Daniel found himself alone with Cassandra in the conference room that had witnessed his professional humiliation just 2 months earlier. The irony wasn't lost on him. The same space where his dreams had been publicly dismantled had just become the site of their collaborative vindication. "That was," he began, then found himself at a loss for adequate words. "Better than I dared hope," Cassandra finished. "Not just the approval, though that's wonderful, but the recognition that what we've built together has value beyond any specific project or initiative." About the new position Dr. Williams mentioned, "Are you interested?" The question was simple, but its implications were profound. Accepting would mean leaving behind traditional career paths and hierarchical advancement in favor of something entirely new. It would mean betting his professional future on the belief that collaboration and partnership could be as reliable and successful as competition and individual achievement. "I'm interested," he said without hesitation. "More than interested. I can't imagine going back to working in isolation after everything we've learned about what's possible when people truly work together." "Good, because I can't imagine implementing any of this without you. We've proven that partnership produces better outcomes than individual effort, and I want to keep proving it." They spent the next hour discussing practical details of transition timeline responsibilities, how to structure a role that didn't exist on any traditional organizational chart. But underneath the logistics was something more significant, the acknowledgement that they had created something worth preserving, something that justified the risks they'd taken and the vulnerability they'd embraced. "There's something else we should discuss," Cassandra said, as their planning conversation wound down. "Alex has been asking if Emma might be interested in a sleepover next weekend. Apparently, they have engineering projects that require extended collaboration time." Emma's been asking the same thing. "I think they've realized that the best fort construction happens when you're not constrained by parental bedtimes and dinner schedules. It's remarkable how naturally they've maintained their partnership, isn't it? How they've continued to choose collaboration even when it would be easier to work independently. Maybe that's the secret we keep forgetting as adults. That partnership isn't harder than working alone, it's just different. And the difference is worth it when you find the right person to build things with." Cassandra smiled, and Daniel saw in her expression the same mix of professional satisfaction and personal connection that had defined their relationship since that stormy night when everything changed. "So we're really doing this," she said, "rebuilding how organizations work, one collaboration at a time. We're really doing this. Though I should warn you, Emma has informed me that Fort Awesome 4.0 is going to require advanced materials and possibly some light construction work. Our children may be more ambitious than some of our corporate initiatives. Then we'll have to make sure our corporate initiatives are worthy of their example." 6 months later, Daniel stood in the main conference room at Meridian Industries, watching as representatives from 12 different companies gathered for the first annual Collaborative Leadership Summit. What had started as an experiment in partnership between two unlikely colleagues had evolved into something neither had imagined possible, a model that other organizations wanted to study and adapt for their own transformation efforts. The room buzzed with conversations between executives and employees, environmental specialists and financial analysts, people who had traveled from across the country to understand how collaborative decision-making could produce measurable improvements in both performance and workplace culture. At the center of it all, Emma and Alex moved through the crowd with the confidence of experienced consultants, explaining their fort construction principles to adults who were beginning to understand that 8-year-olds might have insights about partnership that the business world had forgotten. "Ladies and gentlemen," Cassandra called the session to order, her voice carrying the authority that had always characterized her leadership, but now tempered with the warmth that came from genuine collaboration. "Welcome to what we hope will be the first of many opportunities to share what we've learned about the power of partnership to transform not just environmental sustainability, but organizational sustainability." Daniel watched from his position at the side of the room as she outlined their journey from that Friday afternoon confrontation to the collaborative culture that now defined Meridian Industries. 6 months of implementation had proven that their initial success wasn't temporary enthusiasm, but sustainable transformation. Employee engagement scores had reached all-time highs. Innovation metrics showed consistent improvement quarter over quarter. Financial performance had exceeded projections, while environmental impact had decreased across every measured category. "But the real measure of our success," Cassandra continued, "isn't in our quarterly reports or efficiency metrics. It's in the daily experience of people who come to work knowing that their ideas matter, their expertise is valued, and their contributions make a difference in building something bigger than any individual achievement." When Daniel's turn came to present the technical details of their collaborative implementation process, he found himself looking out at an audience that included not just corporate executives, but teachers, nonprofit leaders, even city government officials who were exploring how partnership-based approaches might improve public services. The principles they'd discovered weren't limited to business environments. They applied anywhere people needed to work together to solve complex problems. "The key insight," he explained, clicking through slides that showed measurable improvements in everything from project completion times to employee satisfaction, is that collaboration isn't just about being nice or feeling good about your workplace culture. It's about recognizing that collective intelligence consistently outperforms individual brilliance when you create systems that actually support partnership rather than just encouraging it. During the afternoon breakout sessions, Daniel found himself facilitating discussions with energy company executives about renewable technology, implementation, manufacturing, managers about supply chain sustainability, and university administrators about collaborative curriculum development. The conversations were energizing in ways that reminded him of those first late-night planning sessions with Cassandra. People discovering that the challenges they'd assumed were unsolvable became manageable when approached through genuine partnership. "Mr. Hayes," a voice called as the formal sessions concluded, and people began gathering for the closing reception. He turned to find a woman in her 50s wearing the kind of practical clothing that suggested she worked in environments where performance mattered more than appearance. "I'm Dr. Lisa Rodriguez," she continued, extending her hand. "I run the engineering program at UT Austin. I've been following your work here, and I'm wondering if you'd be interested in guest lecturing for our students about collaborative problem solving in professional environments." "I'd be honored," Daniel said, meaning it. "Though I should mention that some of our best insights about collaboration have come from 8-year-olds. You might want to invite them as co-presenters." Dr. Rodriguez laughed, but her expression suggested she was taking the suggestion seriously. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need more of in engineering education. "When can we schedule something?" As the evening progressed, Daniel found himself in conversation after conversation with people who had traveled significant distances to understand how collaborative leadership could be implemented in their own organizations. The enthusiasm was gratifying, but more important was the recognition that they had developed something reproducible, principles and processes that could be adapted to different contexts while maintaining their essential effectiveness. "Daddy." Emma's voice cut through the adult conversations as she appeared at his side, followed closely by Alex and what appeared to be several new friends they'd acquired during the day's activities. "We've been talking to the people from the school district, and they want to know if we can help them design collaborative learning spaces." Collaborative learning spaces, like classrooms that are built for partnership instead of just listening to teachers talk, Alex explained with the seriousness of a consultant explaining a complex proposal. "We told them about fort architecture principles and how physical space affects how people work together." Daniel looked around for Cassandra and found her engaged in animated discussion with a group that included Dr. Rodriguez and several other educators. When she caught his eye, she smiled and gestured for him to join them. "We were just discussing the possibility of developing a curriculum around collaborative leadership principles," she said as he approached. "Dr. Rodriguez thinks there might be value in teaching these concepts at the university level, and apparently Emma and Alex have been consulting on elementary school applications." "They've been consulting. We have experience," Emma said matter-of-factly. "And we know how to explain complicated things in ways that make sense to people who haven't built forts before." "Which it turns out includes most adults," Alex added with the kind of innocent observation that cut straight to profound truth. The conversation that followed ranged from curriculum development to physical space design, from assessment methods that valued collaboration over competition, to research opportunities that could further document the effectiveness of partnership-based approaches to learning and working. By the time people began saying their goodbyes and exchanging contact information for future collaboration, Daniel found himself part of a network that extended far beyond corporate consulting into education, community development, and organizational transformation across multiple sectors. "This is bigger than we thought it would be," Cassandra said, as they stood together watching the last attendees gather their materials and prepare to leave. "What started as sustainability pilot programs has become something like a movement. A movement led by 2 8-year-olds who understand architecture better than most adults understand collaboration." Daniel replied, watching Emma and Alex demonstrate proper fort construction techniques to a group of fascinated education professionals. "Should we be worried about that? I think we should be grateful. They're keeping us honest about what partnership actually looks like when it's not complicated by politics or ego or fear of vulnerability." As they prepared to leave the conference room that had hosted their collaborative summit, Daniel found himself reflecting on the distance they'd all traveled since that stormy night when Cassandra had knocked on his door. What had seemed like professional disaster had become personal transformation that had evolved into organizational change that was now inspiring systemic innovation in fields they'd never imagined affecting. What happens next? he asked, as they gathered their presentation materials and prepared to transition from public collaboration back to private partnership. "We keep building," Cassandra said simply. "We keep proving that partnership produces better outcomes than competition. We keep showing that vulnerability is strength, that trust is practical, that choosing connection over control isn't just morally better, it's more effective. And we let Emma and Alex keep teaching us about what we've forgotten about working together. Especially that. They understand something essential that we're still learning, that the best things happen when people choose to help each other succeed instead of trying to succeed at each other's expense." As they walked toward the parking garage together, their children already planning the next phase of their architectural collaboration, Daniel found himself thinking about Sarah and what she would have made of the transformation his life had undergone. She had always believed that kindness was practical, that treating people well was not just morally right, but strategically smart. She would have loved watching Emma and Alex build bridges between their different strengths, would have appreciated the way Cassandra had chosen growth over defensiveness, would have understood that the best partnerships were the ones that made everyone involved better than they could be alone. "Sarah would have liked you," he said suddenly, the thought emerging without conscious planning. Cassandra paused beside her car, considering the weight of the statement. "I think I would have liked her too. Anyone who could raise someone like Emma, who could inspire the kind of devotion and love you carry for her, that's someone I would have been honored to know. She would have understood what we're building here. The idea that work can be meaningful, that organizations can be humane, that success doesn't require sacrificing connection or compassion. She would have understood that love isn't weakness, that caring about outcomes beyond profit margins isn't naive idealism, but practical wisdom." They stood together in the parking garage, two people who had found partnership in the most unlikely circumstances and used it to create change that extended far beyond their individual lives. The children were already planning their next architectural project, their next collaborative adventure, their next opportunity to prove that the best things happened when people chose trust over fear, connection over isolation, shared success over individual achievement. "Same time next week for Fort Awesome 5.0 planning?" Daniel asked, as Emma and Alex finalized their construction timeline. "Absolutely," Cassandra replied. "Though I should warn you they've been researching suspension bridge principles. Our living room may never be the same." "The best partnerships," Daniel said, echoing Emma's wisdom from months earlier, "are the ones where everyone makes everyone else better." "And the best adventures," Cassandra added, "are the ones that teach us something about what's possible when we're brave enough to open our doors to strangers in storms." As they drove away in different directions toward homes that had become foundations for something larger than either had imagined possible, Daniel found himself thinking about storms and their aftermath, about the cleaning that happened when everything familiar was washed away, and you had to choose what to rebuild and how to rebuild it. Some storms destroyed things that needed destroying. Some storms brought exactly what you needed, even when you didn't know you needed it. The best storms, he realized, were the ones that reminded you that opening your door to unexpected possibilities was always worth the risk, because sometimes strangers became partners, sometimes professional enemies became personal allies, and sometimes the most important transformations began with a simple choice to choose kindness over self-protection. The future stretched ahead of them, now full of collaborative possibilities and partnership adventures, guided by the wisdom of children who understood that the best things were built together, and the deepest truth that success was something you shared rather than something you hoarded. And in a world that too often forgot the power of connection, that was exactly the kind of future worth building.